You're here, so I'm guessing your brain decided to stay awake long after your body was ready to call it a night. Happens to me too, but it's okay. You don't have to fight it alone. I've got 5 stories for you, told gently, the kind you can fall asleep to without feeling like you're missing anything. Just breathe, relax, and let the rain carry you along. Story 1. Someone slipped notes under my door every night. So, this happened about 2 years ago when I was 23. I'd just gotten out of a relationship. 3 years with a guy who wasn't bad, exactly, just empty. We'd been living together in this apartment that never really felt like mine, and when things ended, I knew I needed to get out. Start over. Find a place that was just for me. Found the listing on Craigslist, which I know sounds sketchy, but the photos looked decent and the rent was almost suspiciously affordable. Ground floor unit in a small complex, maybe 12 apartments total, tucked away in a neighborhood I didn't know very well. Quiet area, lots of trees, the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen. That was exactly what I wanted. The building itself was old, probably built in the 70s, with that worn-in look that could either be charming or depressing depending on your mood. I decided it was charming. The super showed me around, pointed out the laundry room in the basement, mentioned the elderly woman who lived upstairs and the young couple at the end of my hall. Good people, he said. Quiet building. I signed the lease that same day. Moving in was this strange mix of lonely and liberating. My ex helped me carry boxes, which was awkward, and then he left. And suddenly I was standing in this empty apartment that was entirely, completely mine. No one else's clothes in the closet. No one else's dishes in the sink. Just me and 4 walls and the rest of my life stretching out ahead of me. The first few weeks I nested. That's the only word for it. Unpacked every box, hung pictures, bought plants I'd probably kill, arranged and rearranged furniture until everything felt right. I work remotely, customer service for a software company, which is exactly as boring as it sounds. So I set up a little desk by the window where I could watch the street while I answered emails and took calls. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I developed routines, the kind of small rituals that make a place feel like home. Coffee in the morning while rain tapped against the glass. Afternoon walks to the park a few blocks away. Kicking through leaves as autumn settled in, cooking dinner while listening to podcasts, sometimes singing along to whatever was playing, just quietly, to myself. The radiator would clank and hiss as the evening cooled, and I'd curl up on the couch with a book, listening to the rain drum softly on the fire escape outside my bedroom window. There was something peaceful about falling asleep to that sound. I started leaving the window cracked just a little, even when it got cold, because the patter of rain drowned out the silence in a way that made me feel less alone. The apartment had its quirks, like any old place does. The bathroom faucet dripped if you didn't turn it just right. The bedroom closet door stuck unless you lifted it slightly when you pulled. And the gap under my front door was significant, old weather stripping worn down to almost nothing, letting in drafts and dust and, in the mornings, a thin line of light from the hallway. I bought one of those fabric draft stoppers, the kind that looks like a long stuffed snake, and shoved it against the bottom of the door. It helped with the cold, but didn't quite cover the gap entirely. I told myself I'd mention it to the super eventually, get him to fix it properly. I never did. By the time I'd been there 6 weeks, I'd finally started to feel settled. The last box was unpacked. The walls had pictures. The plants were somehow still alive. I had a favorite mug for morning coffee and a favorite spot on the couch and a favorite playlist for cooking dinner. This wasn't just an apartment anymore. It was home. I felt safe there. Really, genuinely safe for the first time in a long time. After 3 years of walking on eggshells, of second-guessing myself, of shrinking to fit someone else's expectations, I finally had space to just exist. No one watching, no one judging. Just me, doing my thing, in my little corner of the world. I remember thinking, about a week before everything started, that I'd finally figured out how to be happy alone. That I didn't need anyone else to feel complete. That this apartment, this life, this quiet little existence I'd built, it was enough. I was so naive. It was a Thursday night, late October, when I came home from one of my evening walks. The rain had started while I was out, so I was a little damp, a little cold, fumbling with my keys in the dim hallway light. I got the door open, stepped inside, and kicked off my wet shoes. That's when I saw it. A piece of paper on the floor, just inside the door. White printer paper folded twice, sitting there like it belonged. It must have been slipped under while I was gone, pushed through that gap I kept meaning to fix. I picked it up, unfolded it. Neat handwriting, blue ink, just one line. I see you made it home safe tonight. I stared at it for a long moment, trying to make it make sense. Wrong apartment, I told myself, meant for the previous tenant, some weird neighbor thing I didn't understand yet. I almost laughed. It was so strange, so random, so completely out of place in my quiet little life. I threw it in the trash and went about my evening. That was the night everything changed. At first, I thought it was nothing. The second note came the next night. I was sitting at my desk, finishing up a late shift, when I heard it. A soft whisper of sound, paper sliding across hardwood. I looked up just in time to see a white rectangle appear on my floor, pushed through the gap beneath the door. My heart stuttered. I sat frozen for a second, then scrambled out of my chair and rushed to the door, pressed my eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no doors closing, nothing but the dim flicker of the overhead light and the faded carpet stretching toward the stairwell. I opened the door, looked both ways. No one. Back inside, I picked up the note with trembling fingers. Same paper, same neat handwriting, same blue ink. You looked tired today. You should rest more. My stomach turned. This one felt different, personal, like someone had been watching me, studying me, taking notes on my life. I'd barely left the apartment that day, just a quick trip to check the mail. Had someone seen me then? In the lobby? Through a window? I locked the deadbolt, then the chain, checked them both twice. That night, I called my mom. Tried to sound casual about it, like it was just a funny story about my weird new building. She told me it was probably a lonely neighbor, someone socially awkward who didn't know how to introduce themselves. Don't engage, she said. It'll stop. I wanted to believe her. 2 days passed. Nothing. I started to relax, told myself Mom was right, that whoever it was had gotten bored or embarrassed or moved on to something else. I stopped checking the peephole every 5 minutes. I opened my blinds again, let the gray autumn light filter in. Then I came home from my afternoon walk, and there it was. Another note, waiting on the floor like a patient little ghost. I like when you wear your hair down. I'd worn my hair down that day, first time in over a week. My hands were shaking as I read it again and again, trying to find some other meaning, some innocent explanation, but there wasn't one. Someone had seen me. Someone was paying attention to the smallest details of my appearance, my habits, my choices. Someone was watching. I closed all the blinds, every single one. Stood in my dim apartment with my heart pounding, trying to figure out what to do. Call the police? And tell them what? That someone complimented my hair? I could already imagine the skepticism, the barely concealed condescension. It's just notes, ma'am. Has anyone threatened you? No. No one had threatened me. Not yet. I started checking the peephole obsessively again. Every creak in the hallway sent me rushing to the door, eye pressed to that tiny circle of glass, searching for shadows. I never saw anyone. Whoever was doing this, they were careful, patient, like they had all the time in the world. A few days later, I ran into the building's super in the hallway. Casually, or as casually as I could manage, I mentioned that someone had been leaving notes under my door. His face didn't change. Probably kids, he said, shrugging. "We get pranks sometimes." I asked if anyone new had moved in recently, anyone he didn't recognize. Another shrug. "People come and go." He didn't seem concerned. I tried to let that reassure me. It didn't. The fourth note appeared on a Sunday morning. I found it when I woke up, which meant he'd come during the night while I was sleeping, just a few feet away on the other side of that door. "Don't be scared. I just want to know you." The tenderness of it made my skin crawl. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't kids. This was someone who believed they had a relationship with me. Someone who thought these violations were romantic, intimate, wanted. I spent that whole day Googling things like someone leaving notes under my door and signs of a stalker and what to do if you're being watched. I fell down rabbit holes of horror stories, women who'd ignored the warning signs, women who hadn't been believed until it was too late. By the time the sun set, I felt sick with fear. That night, I slept with my phone in my hand. Barely slept at all. The fifth note came on Tuesday. "You sing when you do the dishes. It's beautiful." I do sing when I do the dishes. Quietly, to myself, with the water running. Just little bits of whatever song is stuck in my head, barely louder than a whisper. The only way someone could possibly know that is if they could hear me. He was close. Same floor maybe. Maybe right next door. Maybe directly above me or below me, ear pressed to the wall, listening to me live my life. I pressed my own ear to the walls that night, holding my breath, straining to hear something, breathing, movement, anything. Just the hum of old pipes and the distant patter of rain against the building. The sixth note arrived 2 days later. I heard it slide under around midnight, but I didn't get up. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to my own heartbeat. In the morning, I finally made myself read it. "I know you're scared now. I'm sorry. I don't want you to be scared of me." He knew. Of course he knew. He was watching everything, hearing everything, cataloging my fear like just another detail in his collection. And the apology. God, the apology was the worst part. Like he genuinely believed he was being kind. Like he thought we were building something together. I called my mom again, and this time I didn't hide my panic. She begged me to come stay with her, to get out of that apartment, to just leave. But she was 2 hours away. I had my job, my lease, my whole life packed into these 4 walls. I couldn't just run. Could I? That night, I propped my phone up on the dresser, aimed it at the door, and set it to record. I needed to see. I needed to know who was doing this. I barely slept, watching the phone's little red recording light blink in the darkness, rain drumming steadily against the window like a countdown to something I couldn't name. The footage changed everything. I woke up around 6, groggy and disoriented, and immediately grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking as I scrubbed through hours of nothing, just my door, the gap at the bottom, the faint line of hallway light. For a while I thought maybe nothing had happened. Maybe he'd skipped a night. Maybe it was finally over. Then I hit 2:47 a.m. A shadow moved across the bottom of the frame. Slow, deliberate. I watched, barely breathing, as it crept closer to the gap beneath my door. And then, a hand, just a hand, sliding into view. Pale fingers, almost delicate, pushing a folded piece of paper through the gap with this horrible, patient tenderness. Like he was savoring it. Like this was the best part of his day. The hand lingered there for a moment, just resting, inches from where I'd been sleeping. Then it withdrew, slow as it came, and the shadow slid away. I watched it 3 times, 4, 5, each time hoping I'd see something useful, a ring, a tattoo, a sleeve, anything. But there was nothing, just that pale hand in the darkness, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. He'd been right there, right outside my door at 2:47 in the morning while I slept on the other side, 3 feet away, maybe less. I found the note on the floor where I'd left it, too scared to touch it the night before. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "You're so beautiful when you sleep." The room tilted. I actually grabbed the wall to steady myself. My blinds had been closed. I hadn't left the apartment. The only way he could possibly know I was sleeping was if he could see me or hear me, or both. I tore my apartment apart that morning, every wall, every corner, every inch of ceiling. I moved furniture, checked behind pictures, unscrewed vent covers, looked for holes or cameras or anything that didn't belong. I found nothing, just dust and dead bugs and the ordinary bones of an old building. But I couldn't shake the feeling, that prickling certainty that I was being observed, even now, even in this moment. Like his eyes were on me all the time, and I just couldn't find them. I called the police. The officer who came out was polite enough. Middle-aged guy, tired eyes, the kind of weary patience that comes from years of calls that don't go anywhere. I showed him the notes, showed him the video, explained everything, the timeline, the escalation, the fact that whoever this was could apparently see me sleeping through closed blinds. He nodded along, took notes, collected the papers as evidence, but I could see it in his face. He didn't think this was serious. Not really. "No direct threats," he said, almost apologetically. "Could be a secret admirer type situation. Someone who doesn't understand boundaries." I wanted to scream. He watches me sleep. He knows when I wear my hair down. He can hear me singing in my own kitchen. But I didn't scream. I just stood there, arms wrapped around myself, while he told me to install a camera and vary my routine and consider staying with someone for a while. Standard advice. Useless advice. He said they'd increase patrols in the area, like a cop car driving past my building once a night would somehow stop the man who was already inside. After he left, I sat on my couch in the silence and cried. Not pretty crying, ugly, heaving sobs that made my whole body shake. I felt so stupid, so helpless, so completely, utterly alone. The next 2 days were a blur of fear and exhaustion. I stopped leaving the apartment entirely. Called in sick to work because I couldn't focus, couldn't think about anything except the door and the gap and the hand in the darkness. I stopped showering because the bathroom had no lock and I couldn't hear the hallway from in there. I ate crackers and peanut butter because I was too scared to cook, too scared to make any noise at all. Outside, a storm had been building all week. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and constant, and the rain came down harder every day. I used to love that sound. Now it just made me flinch, because I couldn't tell anymore what was weather and what was footsteps. The 8th note appeared on a Friday morning. I don't know when he slipped it under. I'd been awake most of the night, watching the door, but I must have dozed off at some point because when I opened my eyes, there it was. White paper on hardwood, patient as a held breath. I didn't want to read it. I physically did not want to know what it said. But I made myself pick it up, made myself unfold it, made myself look. "I know you called the police. That wasn't very nice. I thought we were friends." Something broke inside me. He knew. Of course he knew. He knew everything. Every move I made, every person I talked to, every desperate attempt to escape him. And he was disappointed, hurt even, like I'd betrayed him, like I'd violated his trust. I sat on the floor with that note in my hands, and I knew with absolute clarity that I couldn't stay another night, not one more night. I didn't care about my lease or my job or any of the reasons I'd been telling myself I had to stay. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered except getting out. I called my mom. "I'm coming home," I said. "Tonight." She didn't argue. She just said yes, of course, please just get out of there. I started packing. It was just past 11 when I finished. I hadn't packed much, just one bag, stuffed with clothes and toiletries and my laptop, the essentials I'd need for however long I ended up staying at my mom's. Everything else could wait. The furniture, the plants, the pictures on the walls, none of it mattered anymore. I just needed to get out. The rain was coming down hard outside, hammering against the windows like it was trying to get in. Wind rattled the fire escape, made the old building groan and settle in ways I'd never noticed before. I stood in the middle of my apartment with my bag over my shoulder and my keys in my hand, taking one last look around. This place I'd loved, this home I'd made, this quiet little life I'd been so proud of. I reached for the door, and then I heard it. Footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate. The soft creak of weight on old floorboards, getting closer with each step. I froze. My hand hovered over the doorknob, not touching it, not moving, not breathing. The footsteps stopped, right outside my door. I looked down at the gap. That stupid gap I'd never fixed, with its useless draft stopper pushed to the side where I'd kicked it earlier. Two shadows, the shapes of feet, dark against the dim hallway light, standing there, not moving. My heart was slamming so hard I could feel it in my throat. My hand found my phone, thumb hovering over the emergency call button. I wanted to press it. I needed to press it. But some part of me was frozen, paralyzed, waiting to see what would happen next. Seconds stretched into forever. The shadows didn't move. He was just standing there, inches away, separated from me by nothing but a door and a chain and a deadbolt that suddenly felt like tissue paper. Then, a soft sound. Paper sliding across hardwood. A note appeared at my feet, pushed through the gap slowly, almost lovingly. I watched it unfold slightly as it came to rest on the floor, white against dark, and I knew I wasn't going to pick it up. I wasn't going to read it. I wasn't going to give him that. The feet didn't move. I took a step back, slowly, silently. My bag slipped off my shoulder and I let it fall, not caring about the noise, just needing my hands free, needing to be ready to run. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps, almost gentle, like a friend stopping by, like someone who belonged there. I stopped breathing. "I know you're awake." His voice was muffled through the door, but I heard every word. Calm, patient, almost tender, like he'd been waiting for this moment, rehearsing it, savoring the anticipation. "I just want to talk to you." I was backing toward the window now, my feet moving on their own, some survival instinct overriding the part of my brain that had gone blank with terror. I've been waiting so long. The window, ground floor, fire escape outside. I could make it. I could get out. Please. I reached the window, fumbled with the lock. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip it. "Don't be scared." The lock clicked open. I shoved the window up, and rain immediately hit my face, cold and sharp and real. "It's just me." Behind me, I heard the doorknob turn. Slowly. Testing. Then harder. The chain caught. The door opened an inch, maybe 2, and stopped. I didn't look back. I was already climbing out the window, one leg over the sill, then the other, rain soaking through my clothes in seconds. The fire escape was slippery and I nearly fell, caught myself on the railing, felt rust bite into my palms. Inside, I heard the door shudder. He was pushing against it. The chain was holding, but for how long? I ran. Down the fire escape, metal clanging under my feet, rain in my eyes, wind tearing at my hair. I hit the grass and stumbled, caught myself, kept going. Across the small yard, through the gate, into the parking lot. My car. Where was my car? There, 20 feet away. I sprinted for it, pulling my keys from my pocket, fumbling with the fob. The lights blinked, I yanked the door open, threw myself inside, slammed it shut, hit the lock. For one horrible second, I just sat there, gasping, shaking, rain dripping down my face and soaking into the seat. My hands were trembling so badly I couldn't get the key in the ignition. Then I looked up at the rearview mirror. My window, still open, curtain blowing in the rain, and a shape standing there. Just standing, watching. A silhouette in the darkness, perfectly still, perfectly patient. Watching me go. I got the key in, turned it. The engine roared to life. I didn't look back again. I just drove. Out of the parking lot, onto the street, through the rain-slicked roads, past streetlights that blurred through my tears. I drove for 2 hours straight, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, checking my mirrors every 30 seconds, convinced I'd see headlights following me. I didn't stop until I pulled into my mom's driveway at 1 a.m, soaking wet, shaking, barely able to form words. She held me while I cried. She didn't ask questions. She just held me and told me I was safe. I was home. It was over. But even then, even in her arms, I knew it wasn't over. Because I'd left that note on the floor, the one I didn't pick up, the one I didn't read, and I had no idea what it said. The police went to the building the next morning. I wasn't there. I was at my mom's house, wrapped in a blanket on her couch, running on no sleep and too much coffee, jumping every time the wind pushed against the windows. She'd called in sick to work, so she could stay with me. Neither of us knew what else to do. The officer who called was different from the one I'd talked to before. Younger, maybe, more serious. He asked me to confirm some details, my apartment number, how long I'd lived there, whether I'd ever noticed anything strange about the unit next to mine. The unit next to mine. 4B. I'd never even thought about it. Why? I asked. What did you find? There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause that makes your stomach drop before anyone says a word. Ma'am, do you know who was living in apartment 4B? I didn't. I'd never seen anyone go in or out, never heard noise through the wall. I'd assumed it was empty, or that whoever lived there kept strange hours. I told him as much. Another pause. The tenant of record moved out 2 months before you moved in, he said. The unit was supposed to be vacant. Supposed to be. When the police entered 4B, they found signs that someone had been living there for weeks. A sleeping bag in the corner, tucked against the wall that separated his apartment from my bedroom. Food wrappers, water bottles, a small camping lantern. No furniture, no lease, no record of anyone being there at all. Just the evidence of a ghost who had made himself at home in the empty space next to mine. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what they found in the wall. A hole. Small, maybe the size of a quarter, drilled carefully through the dry wall at about waist height. It had been hidden on my side by the bookshelf I'd pushed against that wall during my first week there. I never moved it, never had a reason to. But on his side, there was nothing blocking it. The hole looked directly at my bed. He'd been watching me. Not through windows, not through cameras, through the wall. Inches away from where I slept every night. He could see me, he could hear me. He probably watched me get dressed, watched me cry, watched me pace the apartment in fear, and I never knew. I never even suspected. The thought made me physically sick. I hung up the phone and threw up in my mom's bathroom, heaving until there was nothing left. They never caught him. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. Cleared out completely, left nothing behind except the sleeping bag and the wrappers in that horrible little hole. No fingerprints, no ID. Nothing that could tell them who he was, or where he went, or how he'd gotten access to an apartment that was supposed to be locked and empty. The super claimed he had no idea anyone was staying there. Said the unit had been vacant for months, that he checked it regularly. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe he wasn't. I don't know. I don't care anymore. The last note, the one I'd left on the floor, the one I'd been too scared to pick up, was collected as evidence. The officer read it to me over the phone, his voice careful and flat. "I'll find you again." 4 words, that's all. 4 words that turned every shadow into a threat, every stranger into a suspect, every quiet moment into a held breath. I never went back to that apartment. My mom hired movers to pack up my things while I waited in the car, too terrified to set foot in the building. I watched them carry out my furniture, my boxes, my plants, all the pieces of the life I'd tried so hard to build, and I felt nothing. It was all just stuff. None of it mattered. I moved across the state, new city, new job, new phone number. I deleted all my social media, changed my email, told only a handful of people where I was going. I did everything the articles said to do, everything the victim advocates recommended. I became a ghost myself, just to escape the one who was hunting me. It's been 2 years now. 2 years of checking locks 3 times before bed. 2 years of security cameras and motion sensors and an alarm system I test every single week. 2 years of sitting with my back to the wall in restaurants, of scanning every crowd for a face I never even saw, of flinching when someone walks too close behind me on the street. I don't know who he was. I don't know how he found me, or why he chose me, or what he would have done if I hadn't run that night. I don't know if he's still out there, still looking, still keeping his promise. I'll find you again. Sometimes I tell myself he's forgotten about me, that I was just a passing obsession, a hobby he's since abandoned, that he's moved on to someone else, some other woman in some other apartment who doesn't know yet that she's being watched. I hope that's not true. I hope he's gone, really gone, locked up somewhere, or dead, or just done. But I don't believe it. Some nights, when the rain is coming down hard and the world outside my window is dark and quiet, I lie in bed and listen. I listen for footsteps that shouldn't be there, for breathing on the other side of the wall, for the soft whisper of paper sliding across the floor. I still check under my door every night. Every single night, before I turn off the lights, I get down on my hands and knees, and I look at that gap, and I make sure there's nothing there. So far, there hasn't been, but I check anyway, just in case. Story 2. My smart TV turned on showing my front door live. I still can't look at a television the same way. It's been almost a year now, and every time a screen flickers in my peripheral vision, my whole body goes cold. Friends think I'm being dramatic. Maybe I am. But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't wake up to their own front door staring back at them from across the living room. This happened when I was 27, living alone in a small rental house on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a kitchen that was basically a hallway with appliances. But it was mine, and after 3 years of roommates and a relationship that ended badly, I needed the space. I work nights at the hospital, 12-hour shifts in the ER, 3 or 4 days a week, which means my schedule is permanently upside down. I sleep when most people are eating lunch. I eat dinner at 2 in the morning. The neighborhood is dead quiet by the time I get home, just porch lights and the occasional cat crossing the street. The house came with some smart home stuff already installed. Previous tenant must have set it up. A Nest thermostat, a video doorbell, and this big flat-screen TV mounted on the living room wall that connected to everything. I'm not really a tech guy, but I appreciated not having to buy a television. I linked it to my streaming accounts, and that was about the extent of my interest in its smart features. For the first few months, everything was fine, normal. I'd come home from work around 7:30 in the morning, shower off the hospital smell, eat something, and crash until late afternoon. The blackout curtains in my bedroom were thick enough to convince my body it was night, even when the sun was blazing outside. I slept deep, dreamed rarely, and woke up to the quiet hum of an empty house. I liked that quiet. After years of noise, roommates fighting, girlfriends crying, the constant chaos of the ER, the silence felt like medicine. I'd sit on my couch in the dim living room, eating cereal at 9 p.m., listening to nothing but the refrigerator cycling on and off. It was peaceful. It was exactly what I needed. The neighborhood was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. Older couples, a few young families, everyone minding their own business. My nearest neighbor was a retired guy named Bill who waved when he saw me but never tried to make conversation. Perfect. I wasn't looking for community. I was looking for invisibility. Winter came early that year. By late October, the nights were already freezing, and I'd started leaving the heat on low even while I was at work, so the pipes wouldn't have any issues. The house made sounds in the cold, creaks and pops as the wood contracted, the furnace kicking on with a low rumble every few hours. I got used to it. Just the bones of an old house settling into the season. I'd been there about 4 months when it started. The first time I thought it was a glitch. I'd just gotten home from a brutal shift. 2 codes, a car accident, a guy who came in with a kitchen knife still in his shoulder, and I was dead on my feet. Didn't even bother eating, just stripped off my scrubs and collapsed into bed around 8 in the morning. The blackout curtains turned the room into a cave, and I was unconscious within minutes. I don't know how long I slept before the sound woke me up. It was the TV. I could hear it from the bedroom, that specific electronic hum of a screen powering on, followed by the faint murmur of static or white noise. I lay there for a second, confused, still half asleep. I hadn't turned the TV on. I hadn't even been in the living room except to walk through it on my way to bed. I figured maybe I'd rolled over onto the remote, or the thing had some kind of auto update that powered it on. Smart TVs do that sometimes, right? They download updates in the middle of the night, restart themselves, whatever. I didn't think much of it. I dragged myself out of bed, stumbled down the hall in my boxers, and walked into the living room. The TV was on, but it wasn't showing Netflix or a menu screen or a software update. It was showing my front door, a live feed, crystal clear. The camera angle from my video doorbell, that fisheye view of my porch and the walkway leading up to it, the dead bushes on either side, the street beyond. Morning light, pale and gray, a frozen bird bath in the corner of the frame. I stood there, staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I hadn't pulled up the doorbell app. I hadn't asked for this. The TV had turned itself on and navigated to a live feed of my front door completely on its own, or someone else had done it for me. That thought crept in slowly, and I pushed it away. No, that was crazy. It was just a glitch. Some weird interaction between the doorbell and the TV, both connected to the same Wi-Fi network, some setting I didn't understand. I found the remote on the coffee table, right where I'd left it. Pressed the power button. The screen went black. I stood there for another minute, heart beating a little faster than it should have been, staring at my own reflection in the dark glass. It was nothing, I told myself, just a glitch. I went back to bed and tried to forget about it. But I didn't sleep well that day. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a question I couldn't quite silence. If the TV could show me my front door, what else could it show someone else? 3 days passed before it happened again. I'd almost convinced myself that first time was nothing. A fluke. Some kind of software hiccup that would never repeat itself. I even Googled it. Smart TV turning on by itself doorbell feed. And found enough forum posts about similar glitches to feel reassured. Happened all the time, apparently. Nothing to worry about. Then I came home from work on a Thursday morning, walked into the living room, and the TV was already on. Same thing. The doorbell feed. My front porch in the pale morning light, frost glittering on the walkway. My car parked in the driveway where I'd just left it seconds ago. I could see my own footprints in the thin layer of ice on the steps, leading up to the door I'd just walked through. I hadn't been home for 12 hours. which meant the TV had either just turned on right as I was walking in, or it had been on for God knows how long, displaying my empty porch to my empty living room. Neither option made me feel better. I checked the remote. It was on the coffee table, untouched. I checked the TV settings, scrolling through menus I barely understood, looking for anything that might explain this. Auto power settings were off. No scheduled recordings, no linked routines, nothing that should have caused the screen to wake itself up. I turned it off and unplugged it from the wall. For 2 days, I left it that way. Watched stuff on my laptop instead, ate my meals in the kitchen, avoided the living room like it was contaminated. I felt ridiculous, tiptoeing around my own house because of a malfunctioning television, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. On the 3rd day, I plugged it back in, told myself I was being paranoid. The thing cost money, the previous tenant's money, but still. And I wasn't going to let some stupid glitch turn me into one of those people who think their appliances are haunted. That night, I actually sat down and used it. Watched a movie, then half a season of some true crime thing I'd been meaning to catch up on. The TV behaved perfectly. No flickering, no random feeds, no sign that anything was wrong at all. By the time I went to bed, I'd almost forgotten why I'd been so freaked out in the first place. I woke up around 4 in the afternoon to the sound of rain against the window, and the TV was on. I could hear it from the bedroom, that low electronic hum, the faint whisper of audio. My stomach dropped before I even opened my eyes. I lay there for a long moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain and the sound of my own heartbeat. When I finally made myself get up and walk down the hall, I already knew what I was going to see. The doorbell feed, my front porch. But this time, something was different. There was a car parked across the street. I didn't recognize it. Dark sedan, older model, just sitting there in the gray afternoon rain. I couldn't see anyone inside. The windows were tinted, or maybe it was just the weather obscuring the view. But something about it made my skin crawl. It was parked directly across from my house, not in front of a neighbor's driveway, not near the mailboxes, just there, facing my direction. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the doorbell app, thinking maybe I could get a clearer image, zoom in somehow. The feed was the same. My porch, the walkway, the street beyond. The car was still there. I watched for maybe 10 minutes, rain drumming steadily on the roof above me, waiting for something to happen. The car didn't move. No one got out. No lights, no motion, nothing. Eventually, I set my phone down and went to the window, pulled back the curtain just enough to peek outside. The street was empty, no car, no dark sedan. Nothing but wet pavement and Bill's truck in his driveway 2 houses down. I looked back at the TV. The feed was still showing the car, clear as day, parked right where I'd seen it. But when I looked outside, it wasn't there. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone again, opened the doorbell app, and checked the recording history. The app stores clips whenever motion is detected. Someone walking by, a package delivered, whatever. I scrolled back through the last few hours. Nothing. No car. No motion detected at all except me coming home that morning. But the TV was showing it, right now, live. A car that didn't exist, parked in front of a house where I was the only person watching. I turned off the TV, unplugged it again, stood in my living room with rain pattering against the windows and tried to convince myself there was a rational explanation. Maybe it was old footage, a cached image from some other time, some other day. Maybe the doorbell had recorded a car weeks ago and the TV was somehow pulling up archived video instead of the live feed. That made sense, right? Technology does weird things. Files get corrupted, feeds get crossed, systems glitch. But I'd lived there for 4 months, and I'd never seen that car before, and the footage had shown my footprints in the frost. This morning's frost, which meant at least part of it was current. I didn't plug the TV back in that night. or the next. I started checking the street every time I came home, scanning for dark sedans, for anything that looked out of place. I installed a second deadbolt on the front door. I started sleeping with my phone on the pillow next to me, doorbell app open, notifications turned all the way up. Nothing happened. Days passed. The street stayed empty, the house stayed quiet, and I started to feel like maybe I was losing my mind. Then the TV turned on again. Except this time, I hadn't plugged it back in. I was in the kitchen when I heard it. That hum, that specific, unmistakable sound of the screen powering on, followed by a soft glow bleeding into the hallway from the living room. I froze with a glass of water halfway to my mouth, every muscle in my body locking up at once. The TV was unplugged. I knew it was unplugged. I'd pulled the cord from the wall myself 4 days ago and hadn't touched it since. The plug was still on the floor behind the entertainment stand, right where I'd left it. Wasn't it? I set the glass down slowly, carefully, like any sudden movement might make things worse. Then I walked toward the living room, my bare feet silent on the cold floor, my heart hammering so loud I could feel it in my ears. The TV was on. The screen glowed in the dim room, casting pale blue light across the furniture, the walls, my own shadow stretched out behind me. And on the screen, the same thing as always. The doorbell feed, my front porch, the walkway, the street. But this time, someone was standing there. A figure. On my porch, right in front of my door. I couldn't make out details. The image was slightly grainy, the way doorbell cameras get at night, all washed out grays and deep shadows. But I could see the shape of them, a person standing perfectly still, facing the door, facing me. They weren't moving, weren't knocking, just standing there, hands at their sides, looking at my door like they were waiting for something, or watching. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the doorbell app, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The live feed loaded and showed my empty porch. No figure, no one there. Just the same view I saw every day, motion sensor light off, everything still and dark. But on the TV, they were still there. I looked up at the screen. The figure hadn't moved, still standing, still waiting. And now, God, I swear this happened. Their head tilted slightly to one side, like they knew I was looking, like they were acknowledging me. I ran to the front door, pressed my eye to the peephole, terrified of what I might see. Nothing. Empty porch. The street beyond was quiet, just parked cars and porch lights, and the distant glow of a street lamp. I looked back at the TV. The figure was gone. The feed now showed exactly what my peephole showed. An empty porch, an empty street, nothing out of place, like it had never happened at all. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch with every light in the house on, the TV unplugged. I checked 3 times, made absolutely sure the cord was out of the wall, and watched the doorbell feed on my phone until my eyes burned. Nothing happened. No figures, no cars, no movement of any kind. By the time I had to leave for work, I was running on fumes and adrenaline, my hands jittery from too much coffee, my mind racing in circles. I almost called in sick. Almost. But the ER was short-staffed, and I needed the money, and some stubborn part of me refused to let a malfunctioning TV ruin my life. The shift was brutal. 12 hours that felt like 20, my body going through the motions while my brain stayed stuck on that figure, that tilted head, that impossible screen glowing in my unplugged living room. By the time I clocked out, I was practically sleepwalking. I almost didn't notice the car. It was parked across the street from the hospital entrance. A dark sedan, older model, windows tinted. Just sitting there in the early morning light, engine off, no one visible inside. The same car from the feed. I stopped dead on the sidewalk, keys in my hand, staring at it. My breath fogged in the cold air. The parking lot was nearly empty this early. Just a few nurses heading to their cars, A janitor pushing a trash bin toward the dumpsters. No one paying any attention to me or the sedan that had followed me to work. Because it had to be the same car. Same color, same model, same wrongness radiating off it like heat. I made myself walk to my car, made myself get in, start the engine, pull out of the lot. The sedan didn't follow. It just sat there, and I watched it shrink in my rearview mirror until I turned the corner and lost sight of it. At home, I checked every window, every door, every lock. I checked the TV, still unplugged, and then I did something I should have done days ago. I called the police. The officer who came out was polite but skeptical. I showed him the doorbell app, explained about the TV, the figure, the car. He nodded along, took some notes, looked around the outside of my house. Found nothing. No footprints, no signs of tampering, no evidence that anyone had been on my property. These smart devices, he said, tucking his notepad away, they glitch sometimes. Crossed signals, cached footage, that kind of thing. Probably nothing to worry about. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake him. I wanted to scream that my TV turned on while it was unplugged, that I saw someone standing on my porch who wasn't there, that the same car keeps appearing in places it shouldn't be, but I didn't. I just nodded and thanked him and watched him drive away. That afternoon, I called a tech guy. Paid him $200 to come out and check my whole system. The TV, the doorbell, the thermostat, everything connected to my network. He spent an hour poking around, running diagnostics, checking logs I didn't know existed. When he was done, his face was pale. "Someone's been accessing your system," he said, remotely, for weeks. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I mean someone else has admin access to your network, your doorbell, your thermostat, your TV. They can see everything, control everything." He swallowed hard. "They've been watching your camera feeds, downloading footage, and it looks like they've been doing it since before you even moved in." The words didn't make sense at first. They just hung there in the air between us, meaningless sounds that my brain refused to process. "Before I moved in," I heard myself say, "That's not... How is that possible?" The tech guy, his name was Marcus, I think, shook his head slowly. He was still staring at his laptop, scrolling through lines of code or logs or whatever it was that had drained the color from his face. The previous tenant must have set all this up, the doorbell, the smart TV, everything. But when they moved out, they didn't just leave the hardware. They kept access. So they've been watching the house this whole time, even when it was empty? Not just watching. He turned the laptop toward me, pointing at something on the screen. Controlling. "Look, these are the access logs for your TV. Someone's been turning it on remotely, switching it to the doorbell feed, taking screenshots, for months." I thought about all the times I'd walked through my living room half-dressed, all the times I'd passed out on the couch after a shift, completely vulnerable, all the times I'd assumed I was alone. "Can you see who it is? Like an IP address or something?" "I can see where the access is coming from, but..." He trailed off, and something in his expression made my blood run cold. "It's local." "What does that mean?" "It means whoever's doing this isn't hacking in from across the country. They're close. Really close." He pointed at a number on the screen. "This IP address? It's on the same network block as yours. Within a few hundred feet, maybe less." The room seemed to shrink around me. A few hundred feet. That was nothing. That was my street, my neighbors, the houses I walked past every single day. "Can you block them? Cut off their access?" "Already done." Marcus was packing up his equipment, moving faster than he had all afternoon. "Changed all your passwords, reset the network, added new encryption. They won't be able to get back in the same way, but..." He hesitated at the door, laptop bag over his shoulder. "If I were you, I'd call the cops again. and maybe stay somewhere else tonight. After he left, I stood in my living room and tried to think. Someone on my street had been watching me for months. Someone close enough to be on my network. Someone who had access to the house before I ever moved in. The previous tenant. I didn't know anything about them. The landlord had mentioned they'd moved out in a hurry, something about a job relocation, but I'd never thought to ask questions, never thought it mattered. I pulled out my phone and called the landlord, got his voicemail, left a message asking about the previous tenant, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to sound like I was losing my mind. Then I started packing a bag. I was in the bedroom, shoving clothes into a duffel, when I heard the TV turn on. The sound stopped me cold. That hum, that glow bleeding down the hallway. But Marcus had changed everything. He'd locked them out. He'd said they couldn't get back in. I walked toward the living room slowly, each step heavier than the last. The floor creaked beneath my feet. Rain had started outside, tapping against the windows, muffling the silence. The TV was on, and this time, it wasn't showing my front door. It was showing my bedroom. I was looking at my own room from an angle I didn't recognize, high up, in the corner, pointed down at my bed. At the duffel bag I'd just been packing. At the indent on the mattress where I'd been sitting seconds ago, there was a camera in my bedroom, hidden somewhere I'd never thought to look. And whoever was on the other end had just watched me pack to leave. They knew. I ran, didn't grab the bag, didn't grab anything, just bolted for the front door, yanked it open, and sprinted out into the rain. My car was in the driveway, and I fumbled for my keys, dropped them, picked them up with shaking hands. That's when I saw him. Across the street, standing on the sidewalk in the rain, not moving, not hiding, just watching me. A man in a dark jacket, hood pulled up, face impossible to make out in the gray afternoon light. But I could feel his eyes on me, could feel the weight of his attention like a physical thing pressing against my chest. The dark sedan was parked behind him. I got in my car, locked the doors, started the engine. He didn't move, didn't chase me. Just stood there in the rain, watching as I threw the car into reverse and peeled out of my driveway. I watched him in the rearview mirror as I drove away. He stayed perfectly still, a dark shape growing smaller and smaller, until I turned the corner and he disappeared. I drove straight to the police station, didn't call, didn't stop, just walked in, soaking wet and shaking, and told them everything. The TV, the cameras, the man across the street. This time, they listened. This time, something in my face must have convinced them I wasn't crazy. They sent 2 officers back to the house with me. I waited in the car while they went inside, too terrified to set foot in that place again. When they came out, one of them was holding a small plastic bag. Inside was a camera, tiny, wireless, small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. They'd found it mounted in the corner of my bedroom ceiling, hidden in the shadow of the light fixture. And that wasn't the only one. They found 3 more. Living room, kitchen, bathroom. Every room in the house, every angle covered. Whoever had been watching me hadn't missed a thing. But the man across the street was gone. The dark sedan was gone. And when they traced the IP address Marcus had found, it led to an empty lot 3 blocks away. No house, no connection, just a dead end. They never found him. The investigation took weeks. Police pulled records, interviewed neighbors, dug into the history of that house like it was a crime scene, which I guess it was. They dusted for fingerprints on the cameras, ran serial numbers, tried to trace the equipment back to whoever had purchased it. All dead ends. The cameras were generic, cheap stuff you could buy at any electronics store or order online with a prepaid card. No prints, no DNA, nothing that could identify who had installed them or when. The footage they'd been recording had been streaming to a cloud server registered under a fake name, paid for with cryptocurrency. Whoever this person was, they knew exactly how to stay invisible. But the previous tenant, That's where things got strange. The landlord finally called me back, gave me what little information he had. The guy who'd lived there before me was named David Mercer, 34 years old, worked in IT, had rented the house for almost 2 years. Quiet tenant, always paid on time, never caused problems. Then one day, about a month before I moved in, he just left. Broke his lease, forfeited his deposit, didn't even bother to clean the place out. Just vanished. The landlord assumed it was a job thing. People relocate all the time, especially tech workers. He'd cleaned out the leftover furniture himself, kept the smart home stuff because it was mounted to the walls and seemed like a nice selling point for the next tenant. For me. The police tracked down David Mercer's last known address, an apartment complex 2 states away. But when they got there, the unit was empty. He'd moved out months ago, left no forwarding address. His employer said he'd quit without notice around the same time he'd abandoned my house. His phone was disconnected. His social media accounts had been deleted. It was like he'd erased himself from existence. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. David Mercer didn't match the figure I saw across the street. The police showed me his driver's license photo. Average height, brown hair, glasses, the kind of face you'd forget 5 seconds after seeing it. The man in the rain had been taller, broader, different, which meant either David Mercer had changed dramatically in the months since that photo was taken, or there was someone else involved. Someone he was working with. Someone who was still out there, still watching, while David had disappeared into the wind. The police couldn't answer that question. Neither could I. I never went back to that house. Not once. I hired movers to pack up my stuff and bring it to a storage unit. And even then, I threw away anything that had been in the bedroom or bathroom. Couldn't stand the thought of keeping things that had been watched, cataloged, recorded without my knowledge. I stayed with a co-worker for a few weeks, then found a new apartment across town. Different neighborhood, different landlord, no smart home devices of any kind. I went through the place inch by inch before I signed the lease, checking every corner, every light fixture, every vent and outlet for anything that didn't belong. I do that everywhere now. Hotels, friends' houses, public bathrooms. I've become the kind of person who scans ceilings and pokes at smoke detectors, who notices every tiny hole and unexplained wire. People think I'm paranoid. Maybe I am. But they didn't see themselves on that screen. They didn't watch their own bedroom appear on their television, filmed from an angle they didn't know existed. They didn't feel that violation, the realization that every private moment, every vulnerable second had been collected by a stranger like specimens in a jar. I still work at the hospital, but I requested a schedule change. Day shifts now, when the world is bright and full of people, when I can walk to my car in a crowded parking lot instead of an empty one. I don't sleep well, haven't since it happened, but at least I'm not alone in the dark anymore. The dark sedan, I've seen it twice since I moved, or I think I have. Once parked outside a grocery store, once idling at a red light, 2 cars behind me. Both times I couldn't be sure. Both times it was gone before I could get a better look. Maybe it's just a common car. Maybe I'm seeing patterns that aren't there. That's what my therapist says, that hypervigilance is a normal response to trauma, that my brain is trying to protect me by finding threats everywhere, that eventually the fear will fade. I want to believe her, but some nights, when the rain is coming down and my apartment is quiet, I catch myself staring at my television. It's a dumb TV now, not smart, no Wi-Fi capability, no connection to anything except a power outlet in my wall. I made sure of that. I checked 3 times before I bought it. And still, sometimes, I swear I see the screen flicker. Just for a second. Just a tiny pulse of light, there and gone, like something trying to wake up, like something checking to see if I'm still watching. I always tell myself it's nothing. A reflection from outside. A trick of the light. My traumatized brain inventing threats to justify the fear that never quite goes away. but I don't turn my back on it anymore. I sit on my couch with the TV in my peripheral vision, and I wait for the moment it might turn on by itself. Wait for the image of my own front door to appear. Wait for the figure in the rain to come back, standing on some new sidewalk outside some new window, watching me like he never stopped. Because that's the thing about being watched, really watched, by someone who knows how to hide. You never stop feeling their eyes, even when you can't see them, even when you're not sure they're there. You just keep checking, keep scanning, keep waiting for the screen to flicker one more time. And you hope, you really, really hope that tonight isn't the night it does. Story 3. The Hitchhiker Who Knew My Childhood Address. I have one rule now, and I don't break it for anyone. I never stop for strangers on the road, not for people with flat tires, not for women with babies, not for old men who look like they couldn't hurt a fly. I drive past them all, eyes forward, doors locked, and I don't feel guilty about it anymore. People think that makes me cold. Maybe it does. But they weren't in that car with me 3 years ago. They didn't hear what I heard. They don't know what it's like to sit 2 feet away from someone who shouldn't exist, who knows things about your life that no living person should know. I was 24 when it happened, driving back to my hometown for my grandmother's funeral, a 6-hour trip through the kind of empty rural highways that make you feel like the last person on earth. I left later than I should have, around 4 in the afternoon, thinking I'd make it before dark. But there was construction outside Columbus that ate up 2 hours, and by the time I hit the back roads of Seneca County, the sun was long gone. I grew up in a tiny town called Fostoria, the kind of place that empties out the second kids are old enough to leave. I'd been gone since I was 18, first for college, then for a job in Chicago that kept me busy enough to skip holidays and miss birthdays. Grandma and I talked on the phone sometimes, but I hadn't been back in almost 4 years. Hadn't seen the house I grew up in, the streets I used to bike down, any of it. Part of me had been dreading this trip for reasons I couldn't quite name. The night was cold and clear, one of those late October evenings where you can see every star if you get far enough from the city lights. My headlights carved a tunnel through the darkness, illuminating nothing but empty fields and the occasional farmhouse set way back from the road. No other cars, no signs of life, just me and the hum of the engine and the static-laced country station I'd found on the radio. I almost didn't see him. He was standing on the shoulder about a quarter mile past a dead intersection, thumb out, illuminated for just a second in my high beams before I blew past him. My foot was already off the gas, some instinct making me slow down before my brain caught up. I looked in the rearview mirror. He was still there, a dark shape against darker fields, not moving. Every true crime podcast I'd ever listened to was screaming at me to keep driving. It was almost 10 at night. I was alone. I was a woman. This was exactly the kind of situation that ended with your photo on a missing person's flyer, but it was freezing outside. I could see my breath fogging the windshield, and the next town was at least 20 miles away. And something about the way he was standing, shoulders hunched against the cold, made him look more pathetic than threatening. He wasn't flagging me down aggressively or stepping into the road. He was just waiting, like he'd been waiting for a long time. I told myself I'd just ask if he was okay. I wouldn't let him in the car. I'd crack the window, ask if he needed me to call someone, and then drive away. That was the safe thing to do. I pulled onto the shoulder and put the car in reverse. In the red glow of my taillights, I watched him walk toward me. Average height, thin build, wearing a jacket that looked too light for the weather. As he got closer, I could make out more details. Pale face, dark hair, maybe mid-30s. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that should have set off alarm bells. But something did. Something I couldn't identify. A wrongness that prickled at the back of my neck like static electricity. I rolled down my window about 3 inches. Cold air rushed in, sharp enough to make my eyes water. "You okay?" I called out. "You need help?" He stopped a few feet from my door. Up close, his face was gaunt, cheekbones too prominent, eyes set deep in shadowed sockets. He looked tired, not drunk or high, just exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. "Car broke down about 5 miles back," he said. His voice was quiet, a little hoarse. "I've been walking for a while." I glanced at his shoes. Old sneakers, not hiking boots. No bag, no phone visible. Who walks 5 miles on a freezing night in sneakers without even a backpack? "I can call someone for you," I said. "There's a tow service in." "I just need a ride into town." He rubbed his hands together, breath pluming white. "Fostoria, you're heading that way, right?" I hadn't told him where I was going. "How did you know that?" He shrugged, a small movement. "Only thing down this road. Nothing else for 30 miles. That was true. It made sense. But something about the way he'd said it, so certain, so casual, made my stomach tighten. I should have driven away. I should have said sorry, rolled up my window, and left him there in the cold. That's what the smart version of me would have done. The version that listened to her instincts, instead of rationalizing them away. But I thought about my grandmother, who had picked up hitchhikers her whole life, who always said you could tell a good person by their eyes. I thought about how cold it was, how far he'd have to walk, how I'd feel if I heard tomorrow that someone had frozen to death on this road because I was too scared to help. So I unlocked the passenger door. "Get in," I said, "but I'm telling you right now, I have pepper spray and I know how to use it." He smiled, just a small one, barely a curve of his lips. "I believe you," he said. And he got in. The first few minutes were quiet. He settled into the passenger seat, rubbing his hands together in front of the heating vent, and I pulled back onto the road. The headlights stretched out ahead of us, cutting through darkness so complete it felt like driving through a void. No moon, no stars anymore. Clouds had rolled in while we'd been talking. I kept my eyes on the road, hyper-aware of his presence beside me, the way he breathed, the rustle of his jacket when he shifted, the faint smell that clung to him, not unpleasant exactly, but strange, like old leaves and something metallic underneath. "Thank you," he said after a while, "for stopping. Most people don't anymore." "It's cold," I said, like that explained everything. "It is." He was looking out the window, watching the empty fields scroll past. "Supposed to get colder tonight. First frost of the season." I nodded, not sure what to say. Small talk with strangers had never been my strength, and small talk with strangers I'd picked up on the side of a deserted highway felt impossible. "You from around here?" he asked. "Used to be. Moved away a long time ago." "Fostoria, right?" I glanced at him. "You said that earlier. How'd you know?" "Like I said, only thing down this road." "No, I mean..." I hesitated, trying to articulate the thing that was bothering me. "You said it like you knew, not like you were guessing." He turned to look at me. In the dim glow of the dashboard, his eyes were unreadable. Maybe I'm just good at reading people. Something about his tone made my grip tighten on the steering wheel. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You've got that look," he said. "The one people get when they're going home for the first time in a while, nervous, a little sad." He paused. "Someone died, didn't they?" My stomach dropped. "How did you—" "The dress in the back seat, black, still has the tags on it. You bought it for a funeral." I looked in the rearview mirror. The dress was there, draped across the back seat, exactly like he said. I'd bought it at a Macy's in Chicago 2 days ago. Hadn't even taken it out of the bag until this morning. "You're observant," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I notice things." We drove in silence for another mile. The road curved through a patch of woods, bare branches reaching over us like skeletal fingers, and then opened up into more farmland. In the distance, I could see the faint glow of Fostoria's lights on the horizon. "Who was it?" he asked. "The person who died." "My grandmother." "I'm sorry." He said it like he meant it. "Were you close?" "When I was younger, not so much lately." I didn't know why I was telling him this. I hadn't been back in a while. 4 years, he said. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What?" "That's how long it's been, right? Since you came home?" I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. My throat had closed up, my heart suddenly pounding against my ribs. "How do you know that?" My voice came out strange, too high. He didn't respond right away, just sat there, looking at me with those shadowed eyes, his expression completely neutral. "Lucky guess," he said finally. "That's not. You can't just guess something like that. People are predictable. You left at 18, probably for college, came back for holidays the first couple years, then less and less. By 20, you were only coming for Christmas. By 22, not even that." He shrugged. "It's a common pattern. Small-town kids who get out and don't look back." It was logical. It made sense. It was exactly the kind of cold-reading trick a con artist might use. But he'd said 4 years. And he was right. Exactly right. "I should drop you at the gas station," I said. "The one on Route 12. You can call someone from there." "The Marathon station? It closed 2 years ago." He was right about that, too. "There's a diner then. Rosie's. Open 24 hours. Rosie's closed after she died. Heart attack, I think. You probably didn't hear about that." I hadn't. But I also hadn't asked how he knew about Rosie's. A diner I used to go to with my grandmother when I was a kid. A place I hadn't thought about in over a decade. "How do you know all this?" I asked. My voice was shaking now. "Who are you?" "I told you. I'm just passing through." People passing through don't know about local diners. They don't know how long it's been since someone visited their hometown. He turned back to the window, watching the lights of Fostoria grow closer. "Maybe I lived here once, a long time ago." "Did you?" "In a way." The answer made no sense, but before I could push further, he spoke again. "You grew up on Maple Street, didn't you? The yellow house with the big oak tree in the front yard. Your bedroom was on the second floor, left side. You used to hang a bird feeder outside your window because you liked watching the cardinals in the morning." I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop in the middle of the empty road, my seatbelt locking hard against my chest. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep them on the wheel. "Get out." He didn't move. I said, "Get out of my car. Now. I'm not going to hurt you." His voice was calm. Too calm. "I just wanted to talk. How do you know where I grew up? How do you know about the bird feeder?" I was crying now, tears streaming down my face, fear and confusion tangled together in my chest. "Who the hell are you?" He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said something that stopped my heart. "I know because I used to watch you, Melissa, every morning, from the backyard." He knew my name. I had never told him my name. The car was still idling in the middle of the road. My foot hovered over the gas pedal, every instinct screaming at me to floor it, to drive until I hit civilization, until there were witnesses and lights and people who could help me. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, pinned in place by the weight of his words, by the impossible thing he'd just said. "How do you know my name?" He was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Sad, maybe. Or tired. Like this conversation was costing him something. "I told you. I used to watch you." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." My hand found my phone in the cup holder. I grabbed it, started dialing 911 with shaking fingers. "I'm calling the police. You're going to tell them who you are and how you know these things about me, and then..." "The Whitmore boy," he said quietly. My thumb froze over the call button. What did you say? The Whitmore boy. That's what everyone called me. I lived 3 houses down from you, in the blue split level with the chain link fence. My parents were Dale and Susan. They moved away in '98 after everything happened. The Whitmore boy. The name hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't thought about him in years, hadn't let myself think about him. But suddenly I was 8 years old again, standing at my bedroom window, watching the police cars in the Whitmore's driveway, listening to my mother tell my father in a low, horrified voice that the boy had disappeared, that they'd found his bicycle by the train tracks, but no sign of him, that everyone was searching, but no one expected to find him alive. They never did find him. Not a body, not a clue, nothing. He just vanished, and a few months later his parents moved away, and eventually people stopped talking about it. He became a ghost story, the kind of thing older kids whispered about to scare younger ones, a cautionary tale about not wandering off alone. I was staring at the man in my passenger seat, trying to reconcile what I remembered with what I was seeing. The Whitmore boy had been 10 years old when he disappeared. Brown hair, freckles, a gap-toothed smile. I'd seen him around the neighborhood sometimes, riding his bike or throwing a ball against his garage door. This man was in his 30s, gaunt, hollow-eyed, nothing like the child I barely remembered. "That's not possible," I whispered. "He disappeared. He's been gone for 23 years, he finished. "I know. So, you can't be him unless..." I stopped, a new fear blooming in my chest. "Unless you're the one who took him. Is that it? You knew him, you heard him, and now you know all this stuff about the neighborhood because..." "I didn't hurt anyone." His voice was sharp for the first time, an edge of something raw beneath the exhaustion. "I am him. I'm trying to explain that to you. People don't disappear for 23 years and then show up on the side of the road looking like..." I gestured at him helplessly. "Looking like this. Where have you been? What happened to you?" He didn't answer right away. Outside, the wind picked up, sending a scatter of dead leaves across the road in front of us. The headlights caught them swirling, dancing, before they disappeared into the darkness. "I don't know how to explain it in a way that makes sense," he said finally. "I'm not sure it makes sense to me. One day I was riding my bike by the train tracks, and then I wasn't anywhere for a long time. And then I was back, walking along this road, waiting for someone who might remember." "Remember what?" "That I existed." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "That's insane. You're telling me you're some kind of..." "What? A ghost? You've been dead for 23 years, and now you're just... back ? "I don't know what I am." He looked down at his hands, turning them over in the dashboard light like he was seeing them for the first time. "I don't feel dead, but I don't feel right either. Everything's thin, like I'm not all the way here." I should have been terrified. I should have thrown open the door and run screaming into the night. But something in his voice, the confusion, the pain, made me hesitate. "Why me?" I asked. "Why did you stop me? There must have been other cars." "You're the first person from Fostoria who's driven down this road in weeks, and I recognized you." He looked at me, and for a second I could almost see it, the ghost of the boy he'd been, lurking beneath the surface. "You were the only kid on the street who ever waved back at me. Everyone else pretended I didn't exist, but you always waved." I did remember that, vaguely. A lonely kid on a bike, always riding past my house, always looking up at my window. I'd felt sorry for him. He never seemed to have any friends. "I need you to take me home," he said, "to my house. The blue split level. I need to see if anything's left. I can't just..." "Please, Melissa." His voice cracked on my name. "I've been walking this road for months. No one stops. No one can see me. You're the first person who's even been able to hear me." My hands were still trembling on the wheel. Every rational part of my brain was screaming that this was wrong, that I needed to get away from him, that nothing he was saying could possibly be true. But I kept thinking about that little boy on the bike, the one who vanished and was never found, the one whose parents left town because they couldn't bear to stay in a house full of memories of a son who would never come home. And I thought about my grandmother, who always said you could tell a good person by their eyes. His eyes weren't threatening, they were desperate. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Okay, I'll take you." He closed his eyes, and I could have sworn I saw tears on his cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered. I put the car in drive and kept going toward Fostoria, with something that might have been a ghost, or something worse, sitting in my passenger seat. And that's when I noticed my fuel gauge was dropping. Fast. Way faster than it should have been. Like something was draining it. I'd filled up the tank in Columbus. I remembered watching the numbers climb on the pump. Remembered thinking I had more than enough to make it to Fostoria and back to my hotel without stopping again. But the needle was dropping. I watched it sink from half to a quarter in the space of 2 miles, then keep falling, like the gas was evaporating straight out of the tank. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice thin. He looked at the gauge. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or resignation. "It happens when I'm around," he said quietly. "Things drain. Batteries, fuel, light bulbs. Like I'm pulling energy from them just by existing. That doesn't. I told you I don't feel right. This is part of it." The needle touched empty. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. We coasted to a stop on the side of the road, maybe a mile from the Fostoria town limits. I could see the water tower in the distance, the faded letters spelling out the town name. The same water tower I'd stared at from my bedroom window as a kid, dreaming about all the places I'd go when I finally got out. The silence was absolute. No engine hum, no radio static, nothing but the wind rattling the bare branches overhead and my own ragged breathing. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know it would happen this fast." I tried to start the car. The engine clicked, but wouldn't turn over. I tried again, and again, and again, until the clicking stopped entirely, and even the dashboard lights went dark. "We can walk from here," he said. "It's not far." I laughed, a high, hysterical sound that didn't feel like it came from me. "Walk? With you? In the dark? After you just killed my car?" "I didn't mean to." "I don't care what you meant." I was crying again, hot tears cutting down my cold cheeks. I should never have stopped. I should never have let you in. This is insane, all of it, and I just want to go home. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Then let me show you something. One thing. And then I'll go and you'll never see me again." "Show me what?" "The place where I disappeared." I should have said no. I should have locked the doors and waited until morning, until someone drove past, until I could get help. But something in his voice, that broken, desperate edge, made me reach for the door handle instead. We walked. The cold was brutal, cutting through my jacket like it wasn't there. He walked beside me, not touching, not speaking, just this silent presence in my peripheral vision. The road into Fostoria was exactly like I remembered. The same cracked pavement, the same leaning mailboxes, the same small houses with their porch lights glowing dim and yellow. Maple Street was 3 blocks from the edge of town. I could have walked it blindfolded. My grandmother's house was dark. The yellow paint had faded to something closer to cream, and the oak tree in the front yard had been cut down at some point, leaving just a stump. But it was still there, still standing, still the place where I'd spent the first 18 years of my life. "It looks smaller," I said, not meaning to say it out loud. They always do. We kept walking, past my house, past the Hendersons' place, past the vacant lot where we used to play kickball after school. and then we were there. The blue split level. It wasn't blue anymore. Someone had painted it gray, probably years ago, and the chain link fence had been replaced with white vinyl. But I recognized it. The shape of the windows, the slope of the roof, the way it sat just slightly crooked on its lot, like it had settled wrong. He stopped at the edge of the property, staring at it like a man seeing water after days in the desert. "They changed it," he said. "People do that." "I know. He swallowed hard. I thought maybe something would be the same. I didn't know what to say. We stood there in the dark, two strangers who weren't quite strangers, looking at a house that held nothing but ghosts. And then the porch light turned on. I flinched. He didn't move. The front door opened, and an old woman stepped out. White hair, hunched shoulders, a bathrobe pulled tight against the cold. She squinted into the darkness, one hand shading her eyes. "Who's there?" she called. I opened my mouth to answer, but he grabbed my arm. His grip was ice cold, so cold it burned, like touching frozen metal. "She can't see me," he whispered. "Only you can. That's why I needed you." "What are you talking about?" "Say my name." His eyes were wild now, desperate, tears streaming down his hollow cheeks. "Tell her who I am. Tell her Tommy Whitmore came home. If someone remembers me, if someone says my name in this place, maybe I can finally stop walking. Maybe I can rest." The old woman was coming down the porch steps, moving toward us with the cautious shuffle of someone who couldn't see well in the dark. "I'm calling the police if you don't answer me." "Please, Melissa." His grip tightened until I gasped. "Please, I've been so cold for so long. I just want it to be over. Just say my name." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for one terrible second, I didn't see a man. I saw something else, something thin and stretched, like a photograph left in the sun too long, fading at the edges, barely held together. Something hungry. "Let go of me. Just say it, one name, that's all I need." But I remembered a story my grandmother used to tell, an old story passed down from her mother, about things that walk the roads at night, looking for the living, looking for someone to say their name and make them real. Things that weren't ghosts, weren't human, weren't anything but hunger wearing a familiar face. Things that needed permission to exist. I yanked my arm free and ran. I don't remember most of that night. Just flashes, my feet pounding against cold pavement, the old woman shouting something behind me, the way the streetlights seemed to flicker as I passed beneath them. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out. Ran until I saw a gas station glowing like a beacon at the edge of town. The attendant called the police for me. I must have looked insane, crying, shaking, babbling about a man on the road who knew my name, who'd drained my car, who'd tried to make me say something I shouldn't say. They found me huddled in the corner of the store, wrapped in a scratchy emergency blanket, unable to stop trembling. 2 officers drove me to my grandmother's house. The lights were on. My aunt had arrived earlier that day to start preparing for the funeral, and I fell into her arms the moment she opened the door. I couldn't explain what had happened. Not really. I just kept saying I was sorry. I was so sorry. I shouldn't have stopped. The next morning, one of the officers came back. Young guy, earnest face, the kind of small-town cop who actually seemed to care. He told me they'd found my car right where I said it would be, dead on the side of the road. The tank was empty, completely dry, even though there was no sign of a leak or damage. The battery was drained too. They'd had to tow it. No sign of any hitchhiker. No footprints in the frost except mine. I asked him about the Whitmore boy, Tommy, the one who disappeared in '98. His expression changed. Got careful, guarded, the way people look when you bring up something they don't like to talk about. "You know about that?" "I grew up here. I remember when it happened." He nodded slowly. "Sad case. Never solved. His body was found about 6 years ago, actually. Some hikers came across remains in a drainage pipe about 20 miles north of here. Dental records confirmed it was him. My blood went cold. 6 years ago? Yeah, they figure he died not long after he went missing. Probably got lost, crawled in there to get out of the cold, and he shrugged, uncomfortable. It happens. Tommy Whitmore had been dead for over 2 decades. His body had been found, identified, buried. Whatever I'd picked up on that road, whatever had sat in my car and known my name and begged me to speak its name, it wasn't him. It had never been him. I stayed for the funeral, sat in the front pew of the church where I'd been baptized, listened to the pastor talk about my grandmother's long life and her generous spirit, and felt like I was watching it all from very far away. Like I was the one who wasn't quite real anymore. Afterward, I drove out to the cemetery where they'd buried her, next to my grandfather who died before I was born. The headstone was simple, just her name, her dates, a line about being a beloved mother and grandmother. I stood there in the cold November wind and tried to feel something other than numb. That's when I saw the flowers. Someone had left a small bouquet on a grave 3 rows over. Nothing fancy, just some wildflowers, the kind that grew in ditches along the highway. I wouldn't have noticed at all, except for the name on the headstone. Thomas James Whitmore. 1988 to 1998. Gone too soon, forever in our hearts. His parents must have buried him here after the remains were found. Given him a proper resting place finally, after all those years of not knowing. I wondered if it had brought them peace. I hoped it had. The flowers were fresh. Picked that morning, maybe. Dew still clinging to the petals. I looked around the cemetery, empty. Just me and the headstones and the wind whipping dead leaves across the grass. But for 1 second, one horrible, frozen second, I thought I saw someone standing at the tree line. A thin figure, shoulders hunched against the cold, watching me from the shadows. Then I blinked, and they were gone. I left Fostoria that afternoon, and I haven't been back since. My aunt handled selling my grandmother's house, boxing up her things, all the tasks I should have helped with but couldn't bring myself to face. I told myself it was grief, told myself I needed time, but the truth is, I was afraid. I'm still afraid. I've done research since then, spent hours in library archives and internet rabbit holes, looking for stories like mine. And I found them, more than I expected. Tales of phantom hitchhikers who know things they shouldn't, who drain the life from cars and batteries and sometimes people, who beg for rides to places they can never quite reach. They go by different names in different places, vanishing hitchhikers, road ghosts, hungry spirits. The stories all have one thing in common. They want something from the living, a name spoken aloud, a ride to a specific place, an acknowledgement that they exist, and if you give it to them, if you say the name or complete the journey or let them become real in your mind, something bad happens. The stories aren't clear on what, exactly, but none of them end well. I don't know what I picked up that night. I don't know if it was something pretending to be Tommy Whitmore, using his story to trick me, or something else entirely. Some hungry thing that wears the faces of the lost, feeding on memory and grief. I don't know why it chose me, or if I was just unlucky enough to be the first person who could see it. But I know one thing for certain. I never said its name. And some nights, when I'm driving alone and the road stretches empty ahead of me, I think about that. I think about how close I came to saying those 2 words, how desperate it was, how hungry, how cold its grip felt on my arm. I think about the flowers on that grave, fresh picked, left by someone, or something. And I keep my doors locked, my eyes forward, and I don't stop for anyone. Not anymore, not ever again. Story 4, the warehouse aisle that stayed dark no matter what. There's a place in the back of the Graymont distribution center where the lights don't work. They've never worked, according to the old-timers. Maintenance has replaced the bulbs dozens of times, rewired the whole section twice, even brought in outside electricians to figure out what's wrong. Nothing helps. The lights go in fine, test fine, and then the moment everyone leaves, they go dark again. Aisle 17. That's what we called it. The dead aisle. I worked at Graymont for almost 8 months before I finally understood why everyone avoided it. Before I learned that some kinds of dark aren't just the absence of light, they're the presence of something else. I was 21 when I took that job. Fresh out of a community college program I'd dropped out of. No real skills, no real plan, just a vague sense that I needed to be doing something with my life. The warehouse was hiring for overnight shifts, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and they didn't ask too many questions. Showed up, passed a drug test, watched a safety video about forklift accidents, and I was in. The facility was massive, one of those sprawling concrete boxes that sit on the outskirts of every mid-sized city, processing the endless flow of products that keep America running. Electronics, clothing, furniture, appliances. If you could order it online, chances are it passed through a place like Graymont at some point. My job was simple. Pick orders. A handheld scanner would tell me which items to grab. I'd walk the aisles finding them, load them onto a cart, and bring them to the packing stations. Rinse and repeat for 8 hours. Mindless work, but I didn't mind. There was something almost meditative about it. The quiet hum of the fluorescent lights, the squeak of cartwheels on polished concrete, the satisfaction of watching my pick count climb higher with each passing hour. The overnight crew was small, maybe 15 of us spread across a building the size of several football fields. We'd go hours without seeing another person, just alone with the shelves and the scanner beeps and the distant rumble of trucks loading at the docks. Some people found it creepy. I found it peaceful. Those first few months, I learned the layout of the place like the back of my hand. The faster you could navigate, the better your numbers, and better numbers meant better shifts and eventually better pay. I memorized the grid system, learned which aisles had the high-demand items, figured out shortcuts through the maze of shelving units that could shave minutes off my routes. But there was one section I never went near. The back corner of the warehouse, past the bulk storage area, past the returns processing zone, there was a row of aisles that nobody used. Aisles 15 through 19. The inventory system said there was product back there. Old stock, discontinued items, stuff that had been sitting so long it was probably obsolete. But in 6 months, my scanner never once sent me in that direction. I asked about it once, early on. Made some joke to one of the senior guys about the warehouse having a Bermuda Triangle. He didn't laugh. "You don't go back there," he said. His name was Carl, 50-something, been working at Graymont for almost 15 years. Nobody goes back there unless they absolutely have to. And if they have to, they don't go alone. Why not? He just shook his head. "You'll figure it out." I thought he was messing with me, hazing the new guy, trying to spook me with some warehouse legend. Every job has stories like that. The haunted break room, the cursed parking spot, whatever. I figured aisle 17 was Graymont's version, just something the old-timers used to entertain themselves on slow nights. But then I started noticing things. The way people's routes would curve around that back corner, adding unnecessary steps to avoid cutting through. The way conversations would drop to whispers when someone mentioned those aisles. The way even the supervisors, hard-nosed guys who didn't take crap from anyone, would find reasons to send someone else if a task required going back there. And the maintenance requests. I saw them once, on a clipboard in the break room, page after page of work orders for aisle 17, going back years. Lights out. Lights replaced, went out again. Electrical inspection, no issues found. Lights out. Lights out. Lights out. Always the same aisle. Always the same problem. Never a solution. I asked Carl about it again, a few months in. We were on break, sitting in the little alcove near the vending machines, and I figured I'd earned enough trust by then to get a real answer. "What's actually wrong with that aisle?" I asked. "And don't tell me it's just bad wiring." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the coffee in his hands. "I've worked here a long time," he said finally. "Seen a lot of guys come and go. And the ones who go back there, the ones who spend too much time in that dark, they're never quite the same after. Something about it gets in your head, makes you hear things, see things." He took a long sip of his coffee. "Or maybe something back there is real, and we've all just agreed to pretend it isn't." I wanted to push further, but something in his expression stopped me. He looked tired, not sleepy tired, soul tired, like a man who'd spent years carrying a weight he couldn't put down. 2 weeks later, my scanner sent me to aisle 17 for the first time. I remember staring at the screen, certain there had to be a mistake. Item 7749B, location 17C4, a discontinued wireless router that someone somewhere had apparently ordered. I could have asked someone else to grab it, could have claimed a bathroom break, swapped scanners, made up some excuse. But I'd been telling myself for months that the whole thing was ridiculous, that grown adults were acting like children afraid of the dark. So I went. And that's when I learned that sometimes the dark is afraid of you too, or maybe hungry for you. I still can't decide which is worse. The walk to the back of the warehouse took almost 5 minutes, past the electronics section with its neatly organized shelves of cables and adapters, past the home goods area where kitchen appliances sat in boxes stacked to the ceiling, past the bulk zone where pallets of toilet paper and bottled water waited for distribution. The further I went, the quieter it got, the hum of activity fading behind me until the only sound was my own footsteps on concrete. The fluorescent lights overhead were steady and bright until they weren't. I noticed it gradually, the fixtures getting dimmer, spaced further apart, some of them flickering in that lazy, half-dead way that maintenance never quite got around to fixing. By the time I reached aisle 15, the light had taken on a grayish quality, thin and weak, like it was being diluted by something. Aisle 16 was worse. Half the fixtures were completely dead, leaving pools of shadow between the islands of sickly illumination. The shelves here were dusty, the products old and neglected. I could see cobwebs stretching between boxes, the kind that take months to form. Nobody had been back here in a long time. And then I reached aisle 17. The darkness there wasn't gradual. It was a wall. I stood at the entrance, scanner in hand, staring at a blackness so complete it looked solid. The last working light was about 10 feet behind me, casting my shadow forward into the void. And beyond that, nothing. Not dim, not murky, nothing. Like someone had hung a curtain of pure black across the aisle and dared anyone to push through it. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight. The beam hit the darkness and stopped. I don't know how else to describe it. The light didn't penetrate. It didn't illuminate the shelves or the floor or anything at all. It just ended, like shining a flashlight into a bucket of ink. I could see maybe 2 feet in front of me, and beyond that, the light simply ceased to exist. My heart was beating faster now. I told myself it was just bad ventilation back here, some kind of fog or dust in the air absorbing the light. That happened in old buildings sometimes, right? There had to be a rational explanation. I took a step forward. The temperature dropped. It wasn't subtle. I'm not talking about a slight chill or a draft from an overhead vent. It was like stepping into a walk-in freezer. 1 second I was fine. The next, my breath was fogging in front of my face and goosebumps were racing up my arms. I could feel the cold pressing against my skin, seeping through my clothes, settling into my bones. I stopped, stood perfectly still, listened. The warehouse was never truly silent. There was always some background noise, the hum of refrigeration units, the distant clang of loading docks, the omnipresent buzz of electrical systems. But here, at the mouth of aisle 17, there was nothing. No hum, no buzz, no ambient noise at all. Just a silence so complete, it felt like pressure against my eardrums. And then I heard it, breathing. Not my breathing, something else, slow and deep, coming from somewhere in that darkness ahead of me. In, out, in, out. The rhythm of something large and patient, something that had been waiting a long time. I stumbled backward, heart slamming against my ribs, phone flashlight swinging wildly. The beam caught the edge of a shelf, a dusty cardboard box, and for one horrible second I thought I saw something move in my peripheral vision. A shape pulling back into the shadows, retreating from the light. But when I looked directly at it, there was nothing there. I turned and walked away. Not running, I wouldn't let myself run, but moving fast, scanner clutched in my sweating hand, not looking back. By the time I reached the normal aisles, the ones with working lights and regular temperatures and the comforting sound of the building's mechanical heartbeat, I was shaking. I told my supervisor the item wasn't there, marked it as unable to locate in the system, and moved on with my shift. He didn't question it. Nobody ever questioned an unable to locate from aisle 17. For 2 weeks after that, I did everything I could to avoid going back. Checked my scanner obsessively before each shift, praying the system wouldn't send me to those coordinates again. Traded tasks with co-workers, volunteered for dock duty, anything to stay in the well-lit parts of the building. But the thing about avoidance is that it only works for so long. The second time my scanner sent me to aisle 17, I almost quit on the spot. Stood there in the break room, staring at the screen, seriously considering walking out and never coming back. But I needed the job. Rent was due, my car payment was overdue, and nobody else was hiring overnight shifts for what Graymont paid. So I went back. This time, I brought a real flashlight, one of those heavy-duty mag lights that throws a beam you can see from a mile away. I told myself it would be different. Told myself the first time had just been my imagination running wild in the dark, that there was nothing back there except old inventory and bad wiring. The darkness swallowed the mag light beam, just like it had swallowed my phones. And the breathing was louder this time, closer, like whatever was back there had moved nearer to the entrance, drawn by my presence, waiting to see if I'd be stupid enough to come further in. I wasn't. I turned around and left, but I made a mistake on my way out, a small one, barely worth mentioning. I looked back, and in that split second, in the absolute blackness of aisle 17, I saw 2 points of light, faint, yellowish, set about 6 feet off the ground, eyes looking right at me. I ran that time, didn't care who saw, didn't care what anyone thought. I ran until I couldn't breathe, until I was bent over by the vending machines with my hands on my knees, gasping for air, while Carl watched me with an expression that said he understood exactly what had happened. "You saw it," he said. Not a question I couldn't answer, could barely stand. He handed me a cup of water from the cooler and waited until my breathing slowed. "Now you know why we don't go back there alone." After that night, I became part of the unspoken agreement. I curved my roots around the back corner like everyone else. I stopped asking questions. When new hires made jokes about the dead aisle, I just shook my head and told them they'd figure it out eventually. For 3 months, that system worked. The scanner sent me to aisle 17 twice more, and both times I marked the items as unable to locate without even walking back there. Management never said anything. I think they understood. Or maybe they just didn't want to deal with whatever paperwork came with acknowledging that part of their warehouse was uninhabitable. Then, Marcus disappeared. Marcus Chen was 23, hired about 6 weeks after me. Quiet guy, kept to himself mostly, always had earbuds in, even though that was technically against safety regs. We weren't friends exactly, but we'd nod at each other in passing, share the occasional complaint about a difficult pick or a supervisor riding us too hard. He was fine, normal, just another guy trying to get through the night shift. The last time anyone saw him was around 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. His scanner records showed he'd been working the bulk zone, picking a large order of office supplies. Then, at 3:14 a.m., his scanner logged a pick request for aisle 17. Item 3, 847A, location 17F12, an obsolete paper shredder that nobody had any business ordering. His scanner went offline at 3:17 a.m. Marcus was never seen again. The police came, of course, searched the whole warehouse, interviewed everyone on shift, checked the security cameras. The footage showed Marcus walking toward the back corner of the building, and then nothing. The cameras back there hadn't worked in years. Another piece of equipment that failed in proximity to aisle 17 and stayed failed no matter what anyone did. They declared him a missing person. His family put up flyers. Local news ran a segment about warehouse safety and worker exploitation. But nobody at Greymont talked about what we all suspected, what we all knew. Marcus had gone into the dark, and the dark had kept him. I should have quit then. Any sane person would have. But I told myself it was a coincidence, that Marcus had wandered off, gotten hurt somewhere, that there was a logical explanation, even if we hadn't found it yet. I told myself the alternative was impossible. 3 weeks after Marcus vanished, my scanner sent me to aisle 17 again. I was about to mark it, unable to locate, same as always, when Carl appeared beside me. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, deep lines carved into his face, eyes heavy with something worse than exhaustion. "I'll go with you," he said. "I wasn't going to..." "I know, but we need to start going back there, at least checking, in case..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "In case there's something to find." He meant Marcus. He meant a body. We walked together, 2 flashlights between us, neither of us speaking. The transition from light to darkness felt more gradual this time, maybe because I wasn't alone. But when we reached aisle 17, the wall of black was just as absolute as I remembered. "Stay close," Carl said, "and whatever happens, don't let go of my arm." I grabbed his sleeve, flashlight raised in my other hand, and we stepped into the dark. The cold hit immediately, that same bone-deep freeze that made my teeth want to chatter. But Carl kept moving and I kept pace, and together, our flashlights carved out a tiny bubble of visibility in the void. 3 feet, maybe 4. Enough to see the shelves on either side, dust-covered boxes looming like tombstones. The breathing started almost immediately, that slow, patient rhythm coming from somewhere ahead of us. In, out, in, out. "Don't stop," Carl whispered. "It's further back. We just need to check the first few sections, and then we leave." We moved deeper, 10 feet, 20. The darkness pressed against us like something physical, like walking through deep water. I could feel it on my skin, in my lungs, heavy and wrong. And then I heard something else. A voice, faint, barely audible, coming from somewhere in the blackness ahead. "Help me." I froze. Carl's grip on my arm tightened until it hurt. "Help me, please. I can't find my way out." It sounded like Marcus, exactly like Marcus, the same quiet tone, the same slight accent he'd had. But the voice was coming from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off the shelves, impossible to locate. "It's not him," Carl said. His voice was shaking. "Whatever you're hearing, it's not him. We need to go, now." But I couldn't move, because the voice was getting closer, and as it did, I started to make out words beneath the words, a second layer of sound, like a whisper hiding inside a whisper. "Come deeper. Come find me. Come into the dark where it's safe. Move!" Carl yanked my arm so hard I stumbled, and suddenly we were running, flashlight beams swinging wildly, the darkness churning around us like smoke. I couldn't tell which direction we were going, couldn't see the end of the aisle, couldn't see anything except the few feet of concrete directly beneath my feet. Behind us, the breathing got faster, louder, like something was following, and then Carl screamed. His hand was ripped from my arm, so suddenly I spun around, flashlight sweeping the void, searching for him. He was there. I could see him, on his knees about 6 feet away, clutching his chest, face contorted in agony. But there was something else too. A shape behind him. Tall, impossibly tall, bending down toward him like a willow tree in a storm. I couldn't see features, just an outline, a suggestion of limbs too long and joints that bent wrong, darker than the darkness around it. And those eyes, yellow, ancient, looking at me over Carl's shoulder with something that might have been curiosity or hunger. Carl reached toward me, mouth open, trying to speak. Then the shape pulled him backward into the black, and he was gone. I don't remember deciding to run. 1 second I was standing there, flashlight pointed at the empty space where Carl had been, and the next I was sprinting blindly through the darkness, lungs burning, legs pumping, no idea which direction I was going. The concrete echoed under my feet. The cold tore at my skin, and behind me, close behind me, too close, I could hear it moving. Not footsteps, something worse, a sliding sound like fabric dragging across the floor, punctuated by wet clicks that might have been joints popping, or might have been something else entirely. Fast, getting faster. I didn't look back, couldn't look back. If I saw those eyes again, I knew I'd freeze. And if I froze, I'd end up like Carl, like Marcus, like however many others had walked into aisle 17 and never walked out. My flashlight beam swung wildly, catching glimpses of shelves and boxes and endless darkness. I couldn't find the end of the aisle. It should have been right there. I couldn't have gone more than 50 feet in. But the rows just kept going, stretching on forever, like the space itself had changed while we were inside. The voice came again. Carl's voice this time. Wait, please, don't leave me here. It was coming from right behind me, close enough to touch. I ran harder. My foot caught on something, a fallen box, debris I never knew. And I went down hard, flashlight flying from my grip, skittering across the concrete and spinning to a stop somewhere to my left. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and for 3 horrible seconds I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, just lay there in the absolute dark, waiting to feel those long fingers close around my ankle. Nothing touched me. I scrambled for the flashlight on my hands and knees, found it, swept the beam in a wild circle around me. Empty. The aisle was empty. No shape, no eyes, no sliding sound. Just me and the dust and the impossible silence, but I could feel it watching. Somewhere in that darkness, just beyond the edge of my light, it was there, waiting. I got to my feet and moved, not running this time. Running had gotten me lost. I kept one hand on the shelf to my right, using it as a guide, forcing myself to walk in a straight line even though every instinct screamed at me to flee. The cold began to fade, gradually, degree by degree, until I could no longer see my breath fogging in front of my face. The darkness grew thinner, less absolute, like swimming up from deep water toward the surface. And then, light, dim, flickering, barely functional, but light, the edge of aisle 16. I stepped out of the darkness and collapsed against a shelf, gasping, shaking, tears streaming down my face. My whole body was trembling so hard I could barely stand. I'd made it. Somehow, impossibly, I'd made it out. But Carl hadn't. I found a supervisor and told him there'd been an accident. Told him Carl was hurt, that we needed to call 911, that something had happened in the back of the warehouse. He took one look at my face. I must have looked insane, covered in dust, white as a sheet, and made the call. The paramedics came. The police came. They searched aisle 17 with high-powered lights and thermal cameras and everything else they could think of. Found nothing. No Carl. No Marcus. No sign that anyone had ever been back there at all. I told them what I'd seen. Some of it, anyway. The darkness that swallowed light. The breathing. The shape with the yellow eyes. They nodded and took notes and looked at me the way people look at someone having a mental breakdown. The official report said Carl had wandered off during his shift and hadn't been found. Same as Marcus. Same as, I later learned, 3 other employees over the past 15 years. All of them had disappeared from the overnight shift. All of them had last been seen heading toward the back of the warehouse. None of them had ever been found. I quit the next day, walked into the manager's office, handed over my badge, and told him I wasn't coming back. He didn't argue, didn't ask why, just processed my paperwork with the tired efficiency of someone who'd done this before. On my way out, I passed ISIL 17 one last time, kept to the far side of the building as much distance as I could manage, but I could still see the entrance from where I walked. That wall of black, absolute and patient, waiting at the end of the row like the mouth of something hungry, and standing just inside the darkness, barely visible, 2 figures. One tall and broad, Carl's silhouette, I was sure of it. One shorter, slimmer, Marcus. They weren't moving, weren't calling out, just standing there at the edge of the light, watching me leave. Their eyes caught the distant glow of the working fixtures. Yellow, both of them, bright and ancient and wrong. I ran to my car and drove until the sun came up, until Greymont was 100 miles behind me, until I could almost convince myself that what I'd seen wasn't real, that Carl and Marcus were just missing, not transformed, that the darkness in aisle 17 was just bad wiring and my imagination filling in the gaps. Almost. But I know what I saw. I know what took them. And I know they're still back there, standing in that impossible dark, waiting for the next person whose scanner sends them to aisle 17, waiting to welcome them home. I tried to move on, tried to convince myself that putting distance between me and Greymont would be enough, that whatever lived in aisle 17 was confined to that space, that darkness, that building. I got a new job, daytime hours, an office with windows, fluorescent lights that actually worked. I told myself I was safe. But some things follow you, even when they don't leave their cage. 6 months after I quit, I started researching. Couldn't help myself. The questions wouldn't stop circling in my head. What was that thing? How long had it been there? How many people had it taken? I spent nights falling down internet rabbit holes, searching for any scrap of information about Greymont, about aisle 17, about disappearances in industrial warehouses that nobody could explain. What I found made it worse. Greymont Distribution Center was built in 1987 on land that had been empty for decades. Before that, there'd been a textile mill on the site. One of those grim 19th century factories where workers toiled 16-hour days in conditions that would make modern safety inspectors faint. The mill burned down in 1931. Official cause was an electrical fire that started in the back corner of the building. 17 workers died, trapped in a section where the emergency exits had been chained shut to prevent theft. They burned alive in the dark while their co-workers listened to them scream. The back corner, where aisle 17 stands now. I found newspaper clippings from the time. The fire had been so intense that most of the bodies were never recovered, just ashes and fragments, impossible to identify. The mill owner paid a fine and moved his operations elsewhere. The land sat empty for 56 years because nobody wanted to build on a mass grave, until Greymont came along and money outweighed superstition. But the dead don't care about building permits, and some kinds of pain don't fade just because someone pours a concrete floor over the place where it happened. I think that's what lives in aisle 17. Not a ghost exactly, something older, something that grew out of all that suffering, all that fear, all those final moments of 17 people dying in the dark with no one coming to save them. It feeds on that same fear now, draws people in, keeps them, adds them to itself. And it's patient, so patient. It waited 56 years for someone to build a new structure on its grave. It can wait a few more months between meals. After I found the mill fire records, I tried to warn people. Called OSHA, called the local news, called anyone I thought might listen. Nobody did. The warehouse had been inspected dozens of times over the years. The missing persons cases were all officially unsolved, but presumed unrelated. Without evidence, without a body, there was nothing anyone could do. Graymont is still open, still running overnight shifts, still sending workers into the bowels of that building with handheld scanners and quotas to meet. I checked their job listings last month. They're hiring. They're always hiring. I wonder sometimes how many more have disappeared since I left. Whether the new workers tell the same stories about aisle 17, pass down the same warnings, curve their routes around that back corner the same way we did. Whether anyone has seen Carl and Marcus standing in the darkness, watching with those yellow eyes. Whether anyone has been stupid enough to answer when the voices call. I still have nightmares. 2, 3 times a week, I wake up gasping in a dark bedroom, certain I can hear that slow breathing just outside my door. In, out, in, out. The rhythm of something waiting. Sometimes I turn on every light in my apartment and sit there until dawn, watching the shadows, making sure none of them move. Rain helps, strangely enough. On nights when a storm rolls through and the water drums against my windows, I can almost relax. The sound fills the silence, drowns out the phantom noises my brain keeps manufacturing. I've started leaving the Weather Channel on when I sleep, just for the comfort of knowing I'll hear the forecast instead of my own terrified heartbeat. But even rain can't wash away what I saw, what I know. There's something in that warehouse, something ancient and hungry and endlessly patient. It took Marcus, it took Carl, it's taken God knows how many others over the years, people whose disappearances were written off as runaways or accidents or mysteries that would never be solved, and it's still there. Right now, as you're listening to this, it's standing in the darkness of aisle 17, breathing slowly, waiting for the next person whose scanner sends them to pick an item from a shelf nobody should ever have to visit. I think about going back sometimes. Not to work, never that, but just to see. To stand at the edge of that darkness one more time and look for Carl's face, Marcus's face, the faces of all the others, to see if there's anything left of them in there, or if they're just masks now, puppets the thing wears to lure in new victims. I never do it. I'm not brave enough. Or maybe I'm finally smart enough to know that some doors, once you walk through them, don't let you walk back out. If you ever find yourself working a night shift in a building with a section that stays dark no matter what, a place your co-workers avoid without ever saying why, do yourself a favor. Don't go there alone. Don't go there at all. And if your scanner sends you to pick an item from that darkness, mark it unable to locate and walk away. No job is worth what waits in places like that. No paycheck is worth becoming another whisper in the black, another pair of yellow eyes watching from the shadows, another voice calling out to the living. Come deeper. Come find me. Come into the dark where it's safe. Trust me, it's not safe. Nothing in that darkness is safe. And once it has you, it never lets go. Story 5. The person who stood still under the streetlight across from my home. The first time I saw them, I told myself it was nothing. Just a person standing on the sidewalk across the street, half lit by the sodium glow of the street lamp, motionless in the way people are when they're waiting for something. A rideshare maybe. A friend running late. A dog that had wandered off into a neighbor's yard. There were 100 innocent explanations, and I picked the most comforting one and went back to watching television. That was my mistake. The first of many. I was 29 that year, living alone for the first time in almost a decade. My marriage had ended 6 months earlier, not dramatically, not with screaming or thrown dishes, just a slow deflation of two people realizing they'd become strangers, sharing a mortgage. We sold the house, split the savings, and went our separate ways with the exhausted civility of co-workers who'd never really liked each other. The rental I found was a small Cape Cod on a quiet street in a neighborhood that real estate agents called established, which meant the houses were old and the trees were older. I liked it immediately. The rooms were cramped and the kitchen needed updating, but it had a fireplace that actually worked and a front porch where I could sit in the evenings and watch the world go quiet. The street was the kind where nothing ever happened. Retired couples walking their dogs at sunset, kids riding bikes in careful loops, the occasional jogger, the occasional delivery truck, the occasional teenager slouching home from the bus stop with headphones in and eyes down. Safe, predictable. Exactly what I needed after years of living in a house that had felt like a held breath. I moved in during early September, when the evenings were still warm enough to leave the windows open. I'd sit on my porch after work, drinking wine I probably shouldn't have been drinking alone, listening to the crickets and the distant murmur of someone's television through a screen door. The streetlight across from my house clicked on every night at exactly 7:43, casting a pale orange circle onto the sidewalk and the edge of my neighbor's lawn. I found the consistency comforting. A small, reliable thing in a life that had recently become very unreliable. The first sighting was in mid-October, about 6 weeks after I moved in. I'd been watching some reality show, half asleep on the couch, when I got up to refill my water glass. The kitchen window faced the street, and as I stood at the sink, I happened to glance outside. Someone was standing under the streetlight. They were on the far sidewalk, just at the edge of the light's reach, facing my direction. I couldn't make out features, just a shape, a silhouette, the vague impression of a person standing very, very still. I watched for maybe 30 seconds, waiting for them to move, to check their phone, or look up and down the street, or do any of the things people normally do when they're waiting somewhere. They didn't. They just stood there, motionless, like a mannequin someone had left on the sidewalk as a prank. Eventually, I shrugged it off and went back to my show. When I checked again 20 minutes later, they were gone. I didn't think about it again for almost a week. Then I saw them a second time. Same spot, same posture, same absolute stillness. It was a Thursday night, just after 10, and I'd gone to the porch to check if I'd left my phone in the car. The street light was on, throwing its pale circle onto the pavement, and there they were, standing at the edge of the glow, facing my house. This time I watched longer. 5 minutes, then 10. They never moved, never shifted their weight, never turned their head, never did anything that suggested they were a living person rather than a statue someone had placed there specifically to unnerve me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice thin in the quiet night. "Can I help you with something?" No response, no movement, nothing. I went inside and locked the door, checked it twice, told myself I was being ridiculous, that it was probably just a weird neighbor I hadn't met yet, someone with insomnia who liked to take late-night walks and happened to stop in the same spot. But I peeked through the curtains before I went to bed, and they were still there. And when I woke up at 3 in the morning to use the bathroom, some instinct made me check again. Still there. Same spot, same stillness, same dark shape at the edge of the light, facing my house like they had all the time in the world. By morning, they were gone. The sidewalk was empty, the streetlight dark, the neighborhood waking up to another ordinary day. I stood at my kitchen window with coffee in my hands and tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, that I'd dreamed the 3 a.m. sighting, that my mind was playing tricks on me, that the stress of the divorce and the move was manifesting in paranoid fantasies. I almost believed it. Then Mrs. Patterson from next door came over to introduce herself, and I made the mistake of mentioning it. Casually, like it was nothing. Just asked if she knew anyone in the neighborhood who liked to take walks late at night. She looked at me strangely. "On this street? At night?" "No, honey. Everyone here is in bed by 9. She laughed. "We're not exactly a young crowd. I just thought I saw someone standing under the streetlight a few times. Probably nothing." The laughter faded. Something flickered across her face. Not quite fear, but close to it. Recognition, maybe. Under the streetlight? She repeated. The one across from your house? Yeah. Why? She was quiet for a moment. Then she patted my arm in that way older women do when they're about to say something they think you won't want to hear. The couple who lived in your house before you. They mentioned the same thing right before they moved out. She paused. They didn't stay very long either. She changed the subject after that, asked about my job and whether I needed any recommendations for local restaurants. But the words stayed with me long after she'd gone home. They mentioned the same thing right before they moved out. That night, I sat on my couch with all the lights off, watching the streetlight through my front window, waiting. At 11:47 p.m. they appeared. Not walked up, not emerged from the shadows, just appeared. One moment the sidewalk was empty, and the next there was a figure standing in the light, motionless, facing my house, facing me. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. The sightings became regular after that. Not every night. That might have been easier to explain away, some neighbor with a strange routine, but often enough that I started dreading sunset. 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes more, the figure would appear under the streetlight sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight. Always the same spot. Always the same posture. Always facing my house with that terrible, patient stillness. I tried to get a better look at them. Bought binoculars from the sporting goods store. Felt ridiculous doing it. But I needed to see something. A face, clothing, any detail that might help me understand what I was dealing with. The first time I used them, hands shaking as I focused on the figure across the street, I saw nothing useful. A dark coat, maybe. Pants that could have been any color. A shape where a face should be, but no features I could distinguish, like looking at a person through frosted glass. The binoculars should have helped. The streetlight was bright enough that I could see the cracks in the sidewalk, the individual blades of grass at the edge of my neighbor's lawn, but the figure remained stubbornly indistinct, as if the light bent around them somehow, as if they existed in a slightly different reality than everything else. I started documenting the sightings, dates, times, duration. Told myself I was being methodical, gathering evidence, but really I just needed to prove to myself that it was happening, that I wasn't losing my mind. October 17th, 11:23 p.m. to 3:47 a.m. Never moved. October 20th, 10:08 p.m. to 2:15 a.m. Never moved. October 22nd, 11:51 p.m. to still there at 5:30 a.m. when I finally fell asleep. Gone by sunrise. That last one shook me. Over 5 hours of standing perfectly still in October cold, with no visible breath fogging in the air. I'd watched for that specifically, face pressed to the window, looking for any sign that this was a human being doing human things. Nothing. Not a shiver. Not a shift of weight. Not the slightest movement at all. I called the police on October 24th. The officer who came out was patient and professional, took my statement, drove slowly past the spot where I'd seen the figure. Nothing there, of course. They never appeared when anyone else might see them. He told me to call back if I felt threatened, gave me his card, and drove away, looking at me the way people look at women who live alone and see things in the dark. I almost didn't blame him. I was starting to doubt myself too. But then November came, and the figure got closer. The first time I noticed, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. I'd been watching from my usual spot on the couch, curtains parted just enough to see the streetlight, when I realized something was different. The figure wasn't at the edge of the light anymore. They'd moved forward, maybe 3 feet, maybe 4, into the brighter part of the circle, closer to my house. I grabbed the binoculars with shaking hands, pressed them to my eyes. Same indistinct shape, same impossible stillness, but definitely closer. I was sure of it. The next night, they were closer still. Halfway across the sidewalk now, almost to the curb. And the night after that, standing in the street itself at the center line, like a pedestrian frozen mid-crossing. They were coming toward me, slowly, incrementally, but definitely coming. I stopped sleeping in my bedroom. The front of the house felt too exposed, too close to that streetlight and whatever stood beneath it. I moved a sleeping bag into the back room, the one with windows facing only the backyard, and lay there in the dark, listening to rain tap against the glass and trying to convince myself that walls would be enough to keep me safe. They weren't getting closer quickly, a few feet per night at most, but the math wasn't hard. At this rate, they'd reach my front lawn in a week, my porch in 2, my door in 3. And then what? I started researching, spent hours online looking for anything that might explain what I was experiencing. Ghost stories, urban legends, psychological conditions that caused hallucinations of watching figures. I found plenty of stories. The Hat Man, shadow people, that thing called the Slender Man that teenagers had invented on the internet. But nothing that quite matched what I was seeing. Nothing about a figure that stood under streetlights, that got closer each night, that seemed to be targeting one specific house, one specific person. I thought about moving, seriously considered it, even looked at apartment listings in other parts of the city. But I'd just signed a year lease. I'd already burned through most of my savings in the divorce, and some stubborn part of me refused to be driven out of my home by something I couldn't even prove existed. That stubbornness almost killed me. November 8th. The figure had reached the edge of my lawn. I could see them from my kitchen window now, without even trying. A dark shape standing motionless where my grass met the sidewalk, close enough that I should have been able to make out a face. I still couldn't. Just that blur where features should be, that wrongness that made my eyes want to slide away. I was standing at the sink, frozen, staring at them through the glass, when they did something they'd never done before. They raised one arm, slowly, deliberately, like a person waving in slow motion. The arm came up, extended toward my house, toward me, and pointed directly at my window, directly at my face. I dropped to the floor so fast I bruised my knees on the tile, crawled out of the kitchen on my hands and knees, heart slamming against my ribs, breath coming in short gasps that sounded like sobs. I made it to the back room, to my sleeping bag, and I lay there in the dark with my hands over my ears, shaking, crying, absolutely certain that at any moment I would hear footsteps on my porch, the sound of someone trying my door, the silence of something patient finally deciding it had waited long enough. Morning came eventually. It always does, even when you're certain it won't. I forced myself to check the front window as soon as the sun was up. The lawn was empty, the sidewalk was empty, the streetlight stood dormant and innocent, just a piece of municipal infrastructure, nothing sinister about it at all. But there was something on my porch, an envelope, plain white, no stamp, no return address, just my house number written on the front, in handwriting I didn't recognize. I didn't want to open it. Every instinct told me to throw it away, burn it, pretend I'd never seen it. But the not knowing would be worse. I'd learned that much already. Inside was a single photograph, me, asleep in my back room, taken through the window from outside, the glass slightly fogging the image but my face clearly visible, peaceful and unaware. Blanket pulled up to my chin. On the back, written in the same unfamiliar handwriting, "You look so peaceful when you sleep." I made it to the bathroom before I threw up. Someone had been in my backyard, while I was sleeping, while I was hiding in the back room, specifically because I thought it was safer than the front. They'd walked right up to my window and watched me sleep long enough to take a photograph. Or maybe they'd stood there for hours, just like they stood under the streetlight. Perfectly still, perfectly patient, watching me through the glass until they decided to leave this little gift on my porch. I called Mrs. Patterson. She came over within minutes, found me sitting on my kitchen floor with the photograph in my shaking hands, and didn't ask any stupid questions. Just helped me up, made me tea, and sat with me at the table while I tried to explain what had been happening. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "The Delgados," she said finally. "The couple who lived here before you. They lasted about 4 months before they broke their lease and left. Michelle, the wife, she came to me near the end, asking if I'd seen anyone watching their house at night." "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that I hadn't seen anything." She paused, stirring her tea slowly, but I believed her. There was something in her eyes, real fear, not the kind you fake for attention. "Did she say anything else about what she saw?" Mrs. Patterson hesitated. "She said it started small, a figure in the distance, easy to dismiss. Then it got closer, and then..." She trailed off. "Then what?" "She said it started leaving things, notes, photographs. Once, she found a dead bird on her doorstep, arranged in a way that felt deliberate. She looked at me with something close to pity. She said she felt like it was courting her, like everything it did was leading up to something." "Leading up to what?" "I don't know. They left before they found out." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Maybe you should leave too, honey, before you find out." I should have listened to her. I should have packed a bag that afternoon and driven anywhere else, broken my lease, eaten the financial loss, done whatever it took to get away. But I'd spent my entire marriage being the one who gave ground, who compromised, who made herself smaller to keep the peace. Some broken part of me refused to do it again. That night I set up cameras, cheap ones from the hardware store, motion activated, pointed at every angle of my house. If this thing came back, I was going to get proof. Evidence I could take to the police, to the news, to anyone who might finally believe me. I watched the monitors until almost 2 a.m. Nothing. The streetlight glowed, the sidewalk stayed empty, my lawn was undisturbed. I started to wonder if maybe the photograph had been the finale, if whatever this was had made its point and moved on. Then the motion alert went off on the backyard camera. I grabbed my phone, pulled up the feed. The screen showed my back window, the one I'd been sleeping next to for weeks, and there, standing in my yard, maybe 10 feet from the glass, was the figure. Closer than it had ever been, close enough that I could almost see details through the grainy night vision image. The coat, dark and shapeless, the posture, rigid and wrong, and the face. The face was turned toward the camera. They knew I was watching. They knew I'd set up cameras, and they'd come to the back of the house specifically to be seen, to show me that cameras wouldn't help, that nothing would help. I watched, paralyzed, as they raised their arm again. That same slow, deliberate gesture. But this time, they weren't pointing. They were beckoning, a single finger curling toward their palm. "Come here. Come outside. Come to me." And some part of me, God help me, some small, hypnotized part of me wanted to do it. I could feel the pull, like a hook behind my sternum urging me toward the back door. My legs actually twitched, wanting to stand, wanting to walk, wanting to answer the invitation. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood, and the pain snapped me out of it. On the camera feed, the figure lowered their arm, stood still again, watching. Then, slowly, so slowly I almost didn't catch it, they took a step forward. 1 step, maybe 2 feet closer to my window. And then they stopped, and the stillness returned. And I understood finally what Mrs. Patterson had meant about the previous couple. This wasn't random. It wasn't a stalker in the human sense, some person with a fixation who might eventually get bored or scared off. This was something else, something patient, something that had done this before and would do it again, working toward a goal I couldn't see but could feel pressing closer every night. leading up to something, and I was almost out of time. I packed a bag that night, just the essentials, clothes, toiletries, my laptop, the documents I couldn't replace. I told myself I'd leave at first light, drive to a motel, figure out the rest from there. I wasn't going to wait around to find out what this thing wanted from me. But the figure didn't leave. I checked the cameras every few minutes, watching it stand there in my backyard, motionless, patient. It was still there at 3 a.m., still there at 4. At some point I must have dozed off on the couch, because when I jerked awake to the gray light of dawn, my neck aching and my phone dead in my hand, the first thing I did was check the back window. Gone. The yard was empty. I plugged in my phone, splashed water on my face, grabbed my bag. I was halfway to the front door when I heard it. A knock. 3 soft taps, evenly spaced, coming from the back of the house. I stopped breathing, stood frozen in my hallway, keys in my hand, listening. 3 more knocks. Patient. Unhurried. Like someone who knew I was home and had no intention of leaving until I answered. I didn't answer. I ran for the front door, yanked it open, and sprinted for my car. The morning was cold and gray, rain just starting to mist down from low clouds. I fumbled with my keys, dropped them, picked them up with numb fingers, got the car unlocked, threw my bag in the back, slid behind the wheel. That's when I saw it, standing at the corner of my house, where the front yard met the side yard, half in shadow, half in the weak morning light, watching me. I'd never seen it in daylight before. I'd assumed it couldn't exist in daylight, that it was bound to darkness like all the creatures in stories I'd read as a child. But there it was, solid and real and wrong in ways I still can't articulate. The coat wasn't black. It was a deep, rotted brown, stained with something I didn't want to identify. The body beneath was thin, too thin, limbs that seemed stretched beyond normal proportions. And the face. I finally saw the face. It wasn't blank. It wasn't featureless. It was simply wrong. Human features arranged in a configuration that shouldn't have been possible, like a mask made by someone who'd had a face described to them but had never actually seen one. The eyes were too wide, too round, set at angles that made my brain itch. The mouth was a thin line that seemed to curve in directions a mouth couldn't curve, and it was smiling. I started the car, threw it into reverse, nearly hit my mailbox, didn't care. The tires squealed as I peeled out of the driveway, and in my rearview mirror, I watched the figure step onto my lawn. Walking now, not standing still anymore. Walking toward my car with long, unhurried strides. I drove. I didn't stop for 3 hours. Didn't pick a direction, didn't think about where I was going. Just drove until the gas light came on, and I had no choice but to pull into a station on the outskirts of a town I didn't recognize. My hands were still shaking as I filled the tank. I kept looking around, checking the shadows between buildings, scanning every figure I saw for that wrong silhouette. Nothing. Just normal people doing normal things, oblivious to the woman at Pump 7 who was barely holding herself together. I found a motel, paid cash for 3 nights, locked myself in a room with heavy curtains and no windows facing the street. For the first time in weeks, I slept, really slept, for almost 12 hours straight. When I woke up, it was dark outside, and I had 17 missed calls from Mrs. Patterson. The voicemails were frantic. The first few asked where I was, if I was okay. Then her tone changed. "Something's wrong at your house," she said in the 6th message. "There are lights on inside, but I know you're not there. I saw your car leave this morning. Someone's in there, and I'm calling the police." The last message was just breathing, shaky, uneven breathing, and then a whisper. "It's standing on your porch now. It's just standing there. I can see it from my window. I don't think it's a person. I don't think..." The message cut off. I called her back. No answer. Called the police. reported a break-in at my address, stayed on the line while they dispatched a unit. The officer who called me back 20 minutes later sounded confused. "Ma'am, we checked the property. No signs of forced entry, no one inside. Everything looks normal." "What about my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, the house next door?" A pause. "We knocked on her door. No answer. Lights were off." "Can you check on her, please? She left me messages. She sounded scared." "We'll do a welfare check in the morning. She's probably just asleep." She wasn't asleep. I knew she wasn't asleep. But the officer wasn't going to listen to me, wasn't going to believe anything I told him about figures that stood under streetlights and got closer every night. I hung up and sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the wall. Mrs. Patterson had seen it. She'd watched it from her window, called it what it was, not a person. And now she wasn't answering her phone. Because she'd looked at it, because she'd acknowledged it, because maybe that was how it found new targets. Not just the people who lived in my house, but anyone who saw it, anyone who believed. I'd let it write to her, and now it was going to come for me, or maybe it already had. I walked to the motel window, pulled back the curtain just an inch, and looked out at the parking lot. The streetlight at the edge of the lot buzzed and flickered, and beneath it, perfectly still, facing my window, stood a familiar shape. It had followed me. I don't remember leaving the motel. There are fragments, grabbing my bag, running down a hallway, the confused face of the night clerk as I sprinted past the front desk. But the next clear memory I have is sitting in my car at a rest stop 50 miles away, watching the sun come up through my windshield. I'd driven all night. No destination, no plan, just away, always away. Mrs. Patterson was found 2 days later. The police report said it was a heart attack. Natural causes, they claimed. An elderly woman living alone. No signs of foul play, no evidence of anything unusual. Her daughter flew in from Seattle to handle the arrangements, and that was that. Case closed. But I talked to that daughter before she left town, found her number through the funeral home, called her from a payphone because I was too paranoid to use my cell. She didn't want to speak to me at first. I was a stranger. Her mother had just died. She had every reason to hang up. Then I mentioned the figure under the streetlight. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long, I thought she'd disconnected. "My mother called me the night she died," she finally said. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. She was hysterical, kept saying there was someone outside her window, someone who wouldn't stop staring. She said, her voice cracked. She said it was smiling at her, that the smile was wrong. I closed my eyes, pressed my forehead against the cold metal of the payphone. "I told her to call 911, the daughter continued. "I told her to lock her doors and stay away from the windows. She said she couldn't stop looking, that something wouldn't let her look away." A shaky breath. The last thing she said to me was, "It's inside now." And then the line went dead. The coroner said she died of cardiac arrest. Fear can do that, I've learned since. Terror so absolute that the heart simply gives out, unable to process what the eyes are seeing. Mrs. Patterson died of fright. She died because she'd seen the thing that was following me, and seeing it had made her a target too. I've been running ever since. 8 months now. 12 different cities. Countless motels and short-term rentals and nights spent sleeping in my car because I was too afraid to stay anywhere for more than a few hours. I've learned the patterns, if you can call them that. It doesn't appear every night. Sometimes I'll go a week, even 2, without seeing it. Long enough to let hope creep in, to start believing that maybe I've finally outrun it. Then I'll glance out a window, and there it is. Standing under a street light, a parking lot lamp, a porch light, any source of illumination that creates a circle of visibility in the darkness. Always still, always watching, always that wrong smile on its impossible face. And it's getting closer faster now. The first time, it took weeks to cross the distance from streetlight to lawn, Now it covers that ground in days, sometimes hours, like it's learning my patterns the same way I've been learning its, like it's adapting, getting better at the hunt. I've researched obsessively, spent hours in libraries and internet cafes digging through folklore and paranormal archives, looking for anything that matches what I'm experiencing. The closest I've found are old stories from Eastern Europe about creatures that attach themselves to a person and slowly close in over months or years. Entities that feed on fear, that grow stronger the more terrified their target becomes. The stories say they never stop. They follow their prey until the prey dies, from exhaustion, from terror, from simply giving up. And then they find someone new. I don't know if that's what this is. I don't know if any of those stories are true. But I know what I've seen, what I've felt, what I've lost. I know that Mrs. Patterson is dead because I lived next door to her. And I know that anyone I get close to now is in danger. So I stay alone, keep moving, don't make connections, don't leave traces, don't stop anywhere long enough for it to catch up completely. Some nights, when the rain is coming down hard enough to blur the streetlights into soft orange smears, I almost feel safe. The sound of water on the roof drowns out the silence that always precedes its arrival. I can close my eyes and pretend I'm someone else, somewhere else, living a life where I don't have to check every window before I sleep. But I always check, and it's always there. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. 3 nights ago, I woke up at 2 a.m. in a motel outside Denver. Something had pulled me from sleep, some instinct that had become razor sharp over these past months. I lay perfectly still, listening to the rain, telling myself it was nothing. Then I heard breathing, not from outside, from inside the room, from the corner by the door where the shadows pooled thick and dark. I didn't look. I couldn't look. I just lay there, eyes squeezed shut, feeling its presence like a weight on my chest, listening to that slow, patient rhythm I'd come to know so well. In, out, in, out. When dawn came and I finally opened my eyes, the corner was empty, but there was something on the pillow next to me, a photograph. Me, asleep, taken from inches away. On the back, in handwriting I recognized from the first note it left on my porch, a single word. Soon. I'm in a new city now, new motel, new name, new everything. I've stopped counting the days because the numbers only remind me how long this has been going on, how much of my life has been consumed by running from something I can't escape. I don't know how this ends. Maybe I run forever. Maybe one night I'm too slow, too tired, too broken to keep going, and I find out what it wants from me, what it's been leading up to all along. Or maybe I just stop, give up, walk outside and let it happen, whatever it is. But not tonight. Tonight there's rain on the windows and noise in the world, and a door between me and the darkness outside. Tonight I'm still here, still fighting. Tomorrow I'll run again. And the night after that, I'll check the streetlights, and I'll keep checking until I can't anymore. Because that's all there is now. Running and watching and waiting for the thing that never stops following to finally catch up.